Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of MormonStories podcast. I am your host, Nemo the Mormon. And if you're wondering where John Delin is, today it's about the Europeans. If you ever see this face on its own, you'll be in for a European special. We are talking to Christina today, who's from the Netherlands. And why don't we bring her on? Christina, goedendag, or goedenavond, I should say.
Hi. Hallo, goedendag.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
Smashing. It's great to have you here. So for those watching, this is a ongoing thing that we'll be doing from now on. I'm going to be trying to get voices from Europe and basically anywhere that isn't kind of the Anglosphere and America onto Mormon Stories podcast to share experiences of members outside of that kind of sphere of influence and that sort of geographic area. So today I'm very excited because Netherlands is somewhere that's quite close to my heart, and so I'm always excited to talk about it. But Christina, why don't you introduce yourself? Say hello.
Hi. Well, I'm Christina. As you've heard, I'm from the Netherlands. I'm currently 18 years old. A former Mormon. I stepped out of the church about a year ago. I am from a family that's very devout in the church still. Second generation on my dad's side, third generation on my dad's side, second generation on my mom's side. And yeah, I'm currently in university, studying musicology. I'm very interested in music. And yeah, today I'll be telling my story about my faith crisis and all of that jazz. So,
And so both your parents Dutch? They both from Netherlands?
oh well, my dad is Dutch, but my mom is Spanish, so I'm half Dutch, half Spanish.
Okay. So this is kind
Yeah,
of like extra European.
extra
This isn't
European.
just Dutch.
Yeah.
This is like two servings in one go.
Mm.
Okay, so they're multi-generational. Is that quite common in the Netherlands for members of the church?
Well, I think it really started going in the 50s, as far as I know, like
Hmm.
the Dutch church. So my grandma was actually one of the first um, to get converted.
Okay.
So it doesn't go farther back than third generation. But
Right.
the biggest, like most devout families are third generation. Yeah.
And do you have these kind of big families in Netherlands of that everyone kind of knows?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can think
There's
of
there's
one,
one
but
pretty much in every ward, and they
yeah.
make up like one third of the entire ward at least.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up with.
And are you connected to any of those, or are your family a bit of a lone
No,
gun?
ours is pretty much long gun. Yeah,
Okay. Right. So
yeah.
who are the big families in your neck of the woods?
Oh God, I don't even. I remember the family De Jong.
Hmm.
Um, Other names I barely remember. But you must have known some, right?
Yeah, Vanderput is a name that comes to mind for me. I think
I
they're
I
around the
I
Hague
have heard of
area.
them.
They're quite
Yeah.
a big family.
Hmm.
But it's that kind of church experience, I suppose, because how big is the church in the Netherlands?
Oh God, I don't know how many members it was. I think it might have been
Mhm.
like 9,000 like active members on
Right.
the rolls, but
So
then it
that's
must
quite
be half
small.
of that at least.
Hmm. And so how many stakes, wards, that sort of thing? So,
Well, the stakes, I think there's four
hmm.
four stakes in the Netherlands. One of them is shared with Belgium,
Hmm.
with the north of Belgium. And there's, I think, five or six wards per stake,
Hmm.
approximately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not massive. And you have a temple, obviously in the Netherlands, in The Hague.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
but then you also have, a temple that's going to be on your doorstep in Belgium, in Brussels.
Yeah, in Brussels.
Can you see the need for that, or?
No, I don't know. I don't see the need for that because I've heard lots of people talk about how the Hague Temple is almost
Mhm.
like empty. Not a lot of people are going there, although there's a bunch of Belgians and
Mhm.
even French people. Oh,
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 hey
John is
John.
here. Is he
Gonna
not
kick
supposed
John
to
out.
be?
Well, there was a big sign saying
Oh,
"ignore me," so I think we'll kick him out for now.
oh,
Um, he's just coming in to check on me, I'm sure. So yeah, you were saying
glad to
that
meet
the
you.
the Hague Temple is quite empty. My experience when I was there
Yeah,
personally is, yeah, it was quite empty. It was quite. It's a
yeah, and
lovely
it's
temple,
very
but
small. Yeah.
mm. Yeah, I think it
There's a
was
lot of
built
French
around the
people that
era
go
of that.
there too,
The French people go there.
like just to visit, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, that's crazy. That's really cool. That's really cool. I know that it's not very far from The Hague to Belgium. Just for geography, for those viewers outside of Europe, how far approximately would you say?
I think it's like about a 3 hour car ride from The Hague to Brussels,
Hmm.
approximately. Yeah.
Okay, so to put that in context, I suppose in Britain we'll drive 3 hours to a temple a couple of times.
Hmm.
There are temples in other parts of Europe where people are driving really far. So, you know, it's never been a situation where there's one on every corner, but equally, it's not that far really to warrant another one in Belgium. But enough chattering about that. We'll get onto that later. Christina, I'm really excited to find out where your Mormon story begins. So why don't you start us from the beginning?
Oh, that's a very broad question. Where it begins? I guess it
Hmm.
begins in the pre-existence, doctrinally
That's
speaking.
that's all good
uh,
things.
I don't know. Well, apparently I chose my parents in the
Hmm.
pre-existence, and that's why I have them now. I'm generally satisfied. I don't know what else to say.
Okay. Well, so
Other
yeah,
than
you know,
that,
your parents, any siblings, that sort of thing. Just
oh yeah. No, I have four siblings. I'm the
okay.
oldest. Two sisters, two brothers.
Hmm.
They're all very nice kids most of the time. um, yeah, no,
Did the
like
Netherlands
that.
ever take on that whole like? So, for example, my auntie had 12 kids, even though she's British, right? So this whole idea of having big families, which is a very Mormon
Yeah,
thing, did that take off in the Netherlands as well?
yeah. Well, not as much as in America,
Hmm.
but there's I know a lot of like I think 5 kid families about
Hmm.
that. Yeah.
And is that quite common for the Netherlands, or anyway, or is it generally smaller?
No, no. Generally, it's a lot smaller. I think one or two
Hmm.
kids. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so it's quite standard then for
Hmm.
Europe. So, okay, well then you were born, you chose your parents in a pre-existence, we're all happy. And
Uh-huh.
then obviously you get taken to church, you get blessed, given a name, and then you end up in primary. What's primary like in the Netherlands?
Primary is well, mostly it's just fun, chaotic.
Hmm.
Um, I liked it for the songs. I liked music when I was young. I still
Hmm.
like music, of course.
Yeah.
No, yeah, other than that, primary wasn't very big. There weren't a lot of young kids in the ward that I was in at the time. And when I was like before my baptism, I don't really remember a lot from that time, of course, but
Hmm.
I generally liked it. I also didn't feel like I had a choice in going or not. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So it was very strict for you, like you had to go to church
yeah. No, we had to go every Sunday. Yeah.
every Sunday. Yeah, it's pretty standard.
Mhm.
And then because it's always interesting to find out how it's interesting to find out how the church is the same because we have
Mhm.
a very sort of homogenized church,
Yeah.
and
It's very
then
standardized.
but also how it can fluctuate and differ country to country, whether you get this Dutch kind of influence, whether there's any sort of extra festivals that you celebrate as a church community that are particularly Dutch. Is there anything like that going on?
Um, not that I know of,
Okay.
honestly. I think most of our traditions are just American, honestly.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So it's all just kind of brought in, shipped in from the States.
Yeah.
Okay. So your baptism, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, my baptism, the first thing that I remember is that I had to wait to get baptized um, for a few months. Like, I
Hmm.
had to get baptized after my birthday because my aunt wasn't available before that. So I felt that it was really unfair to have to wait, I guess, for
Hmm.
some reason, because other kids didn't have to. But before I had my baptism,
Hmm.
my dad set me down and gave me this PowerPoint presentation about
Okay.
what it means to get baptized and the covenants that I'd be making,
Hmm.
and just really explaining how it all works and the Holy Ghost and all of that.
Hmm.
And yeah, I remember just sitting there and watching him and him asking me like, "Do you understand?" And I'm just saying like, "Yes," even though I didn't understand like half of the things that he was saying because I
Mm-hmm.
was 8. I didn't know the responsibility and what it really meant, despite
Mm-hmm.
his his intentions and his explanations. I think he really cared about doing it with my consent,
Right.
which I really appreciate in
Mm-hmm.
retrospect, that he was trying to give me the choice and to educate me about the decision.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but realistically, an 8-year-old can't make that decision informed.
Yeah. I mean, we talk a lot about informed
Yeah.
consent, right? And
Hmm.
so, what do you, looking back retrospectively, what do you think your level of consent was roughly? Like, how much do you really think you understood?
Well, like I said, about half. I think I understood that it was probably good for me. Everyone else did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a logical next step in your growth as a Mormon child. And I thought, well, I might not understand it now, but maybe like I'll understand it later, and I'll appreciate having done it.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that.
Okay, and so your dad baptized you, I assume.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, and what? Okay, so what songs did you have at your baptism? Do you
Oh
remember?
God, I am a child of God.
Of course, standard.
Yeah. Other than that, I don't remember. But still to this day, I hate that song with a
Right.
passion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. I suppose that has different meanings for different people, especially as they start to leave the church. That song.
I know
Okay.
it's not just the content of it. It's
Okay.
just I find the melody just grating. I don't know. It's more also on a musical
Uh huh.
level that I don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, we,
But
we,
yeah.
we could get into
Mhm.
the issues with Follow the Prophet and that kind of minor chord that just
Yeah.
jars horrifically, and the kind of what that does to kids. But the music does stick with you, and it's interesting that it plays such a large part of our primary experience generally as members of the church, is this music that we're kind of surrounded by,
Yeah,
for
definitely.
sure. For sure. Okay, so any other memories of your baptism? Do you have any kind of memories of the day
Um,
itself, getting baptized?
well, I remember being really nervous, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I remember like the act of getting baptized. I had to get baptized 3 times because my dress kept like going up,
Mm-hmm.
and that's
Yeah,
that's not
not allowed.
appropriate, not allowed. So I mean, I thought it was nice because warm water. It's nice to
Mm-hmm.
be in warm water, and that's all it really meant to me is
Mm-hmm.
the nice feeling of being in warm water. Um, and I expected, with all the hype around it and the fuss about it, I expected there to be some more like spiritual, like awakening kind of feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't really feel any different afterwards. And I think that's kind of where I started to feel like, oh, maybe there's something wrong with me.
Right. So you kind
Yeah.
of internalized that as this hasn't done what I thought it would do, or I expected it to do. So maybe that's me rather
Hmm.
than the ordinance itself. Okay, that's interesting, and I think that tracks generally with how we're taught to view a lot of things. That the fault will then come with us
Hmm.
if it isn't doing what we think it should. I want to ask you about how you interacted with your kind of school friends and those around you who weren't members of the church around your baptism, because for a lot of people, right, in the States and places where there's loads
Yeah.
of Mormons,
Hmm.
it's just normal. It's like, oh yeah, that so and so's getting baptized, so and so's getting baptized. It's like a quinceañera or anything else, right? But
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
Netherlands, what was that like?
Well, in my case, I didn't really have any friends. I was bullied a lot when I was a kid. Not specifically because of my religion; they didn't know that
Mm-hmm.
I was religious.
Okay,
But I think I just seemed a bit stuck up to them.
right.
I don't really know what they were thinking. They just didn't like me. But there was this one boy that was kind of the exception, and he did like me, even though he didn't interact with me a lot
Mm-hmm.
because other people would kind of judge him for that. But he kind of became like a secret boyfriend. So when I was
Right.
around 8, we didn't really talk a lot. But then I invited him to my baptism.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly, he couldn't come, but he gave me a stuffed animal as a consolation.
Right.
So that's kind of what happened.
That's cute. That's
Yeah,
very
I
cool.
suppose.
But it's interesting you say secret. Why? I mean, the answer's obvious, I suppose, but why did you feel the need to keep that sort of friendship or relationship, whatever, secret?
Oh no, well my parents did know.
Okay.
They thought it was cute because it's not serious, you know.
Hmm.
It's we weren't kissing or anything. We barely talked to each other. We mostly avoided each other actually
Hmm.
because it was, I don't know, it's just weird when you're 8. It was secret for secret for my classmates
Okay.
until up to a point that they realized, and yeah,
Okay. Right. But he wasn't a member, and so
no,
but he
no,
seemed pretty
yeah,
chill with the whole baptism thing.
yeah. Well,
Okay.
I don't know what he thought about it, but
Yeah.
he
But
thought,
I
well,
mean, he
if
sent
it's
you a
important
stuffed
to me,
animal, so that was
yeah, that
cute.
was nice.
That's very cute.
Yeah.
So once you get baptized, how did you start to feel in primary then? Did things change? Did you feel like, oh right, I'm part of this group now, or like you said,
Well,
you
yeah,
didn't
you
feel too different? So
no, you just change classes. You're with the older kids. I did appreciate that because I always felt like primary was a bit immature, especially when I
hmm
got around the age of like 10 and 11.
hmm
But I don't remember a lot about the classes. They were mostly just the same and just very simple. But it's fun to hang out with, peers your age and
hmm
have fun with them. Other than that, I don't remember it being a lot special.
So you were one of those kids that was just ready to move up, right?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah, ready. You're like,
yeah,
I just need to get to youth. But you see, did you
yeah,
feel any pressure at that point to kind of live up to the fact that you are now baptized and because obviously now everything you do you got to repent of, right? So
yeah,
how
yeah.
did you start to come to terms with that sort of feeling?
Well, I think I remember my parents really hammering on the fact that I needed to pray every day and repent
Hmm.
of my sins. I think they started just doing that with me before I go to bed, hoping that it would become a habit, but I don't
Hmm.
think I really ever got used to doing it. Other than that, I did feel a kind of pressure from more the parents than the church because they're more like the authority figures in my life, especially as the oldest child, to set a good example and be a good member of the church as
Hmm.
far as is possible.
Yeah, so you've got that oldest child kind of burden as well. Then
Yeah,
your brothers and sisters look up to you, all that sort of stuff.
yeah,
Yeah, that's cool.
yeah,
Yeah, that's the pressure a 9-year-old needs, right?
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so I suppose unless there's anything else you want to tell me about your primary experience, we can dive into young women's because that's when I think things will start to change. I'm
Get
sure.
yeah. Well, nothing more about primary, but since I was um, since I was so done with it when I was like 11 and I wanted to move up,
Hmm.
and I was complaining about it a lot. I was even like having tantrums in
Hmm.
primary,
Right.
uh, even though like I thought I was so mature and everything, which is kind of like,
Yeah. There's a dichotomy
yeah,
there.
there's a dichotomy. But my parents went to talk to the bishop and said that I would maybe have a better time in young women, so
Hmm.
they allowed me to move up early.
Sweet.
So yeah, that's how I got to young women's.
So you arrived in Young Women's early. You skipped ahead. You're
Yeah.
feeling great because you're like, finally, I'm where I want to be. And what was it like? What was your initial?
The class was very small because there
Hmm.
was only me and this other young woman. She was 15 or 16 at the time. So we
Right.
were just in a class together with two leaders. It was just very cozy and it was mostly fun. Um, and yeah, I like the social aspect of it and just having people to talk to and just friends to look out to seeing every Sunday.
But it seems like you didn't really have any peers your age by the sounds of it. So what? I mean,
No,
how many
yeah.
young women? What were the age sort of gaps?
Oh, well, it was just me and this other young woman at first. Then there were
Hmm.
other younger ones that came in later, of
Right.
course. But she was 15. I was 11 and 12.
11, 12. Right, and there was
Yeah.
no one above that either. So it was literally just the two of you
Mm,
in a tiny
yeah.
little ward. And I mean, how big was the ward roughly?
Oh, gosh. Um, I don't remember. I
Oh,
don't
that's fine.
remember.
Yeah, but fairly small by the sounds of it. If you've
Yeah.
got two young women essentially, so I
Hmm.
bet that young woman was grateful to have you come up as company. If I'm honest, she was probably quite grateful to have the company. But I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
this paints again a very different image to those that grew up in wards where three wards meet in the same building, and there's just you're tripping over youth, right?
Hmm.
Your experience. Tell me about how your experience was different because it was just you and her. Like, did you develop a relationship with her? Did you become friends? Did you get to know her?
Well, we were very different. She was actually a convert
Okay.
at the time. She was very recent convert, I think. So she was very different from the typical Mormon kind of girl.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there wasn't really anything that we had in common, but except for the church. So that's mostly what we talked
Mm-hmm.
about. The activities were fun. We went to the movies, for example. We went to get pizza together, stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. And it was just mostly fun. Yeah.
So the activities probably were quite fun because it was just the two of you. So they were like, well, let's just take these two to the movies then, or you know,
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
basically. Also more stereotypical young women's activities like learning
Okay.
to iron and sew.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I actually burned my hand when we were learning to iron.
So you burnt your
Yeah.
hand. It was, but that's okay because the church does have liability insurance, I'm sure. So that's
Yeah.
fine. Okay, so you did all the stereotypical stuff. What were the young men like in the ward? What were they getting up to?
Oh, well, by the way, this is only for when I was like 11, 12, 13, because after
Okay,
that I moved and I went to a different ward.
sweet. We'll get to that.
But in this one, there were three young men that I
Hmm.
remember. They were all above the age of 14 or 15 or something.
Hmm.
They were mostly very chaotic. They didn't really take the church that seriously. Um,
Okay.
so when we were in Sunday school, I was mostly the one asking serious questions,
Yeah.
and they were mostly fooling around. That was
Hmm.
also there's a place for that. It's fun.
Yeah. So playing soccer on Tuesdays or football on Tuesdays and things like that on your
Yeah,
youth nights and stuff.
yeah. Well, it's our activities. I
Hmm.
think well in my latest ward they were always on Fridays.
Ah,
I
okay.
think the one before that they were also on Fridays, although I'm not entirely sure.
Strange. Okay, so as we're always
Yeah.
on Tuesdays, so there's a quirk for
Yeah.
you. There's a
Okay.
difference. Okay, so you then move. Why did you move? What caused that?
Oh, well, my dad got a job.
Mm-hmm.
He's a radiologist, and he didn't really have like a steady position at a hospital. So he
Okay.
was mostly like moving around the country,
Mm-hmm.
which is very impractical. And he found a steady position in the south of the Netherlands, so we
Mm-hmm.
moved there from around the Rotterdam area.
Okay, so you came out
Yeah.
of Rotterdam down to the south, and then so what was that like moving into a new ward, and in a hugely almost like in a different part of the country, right? This is
Yeah.
not round the
Yeah.
corner.
No, the move in general was very painful for me
Mm-hmm.
because I was starting to feel happy at my high school. I had
Mm-hmm.
friends there. Had to leave all of that behind. The school that I started going to was very lonely for me, but the
Mm-hmm.
church, as a contrast, kind of served as a safe haven because everyone there kind of has something in common.
Mm-hmm.
So I immediately kind of hit it off with the young women there, even though we didn't have anything else really in common.
Mm-hmm.
But we got along well, and I was happy. I was happy to be there, I think.
So you're saying so in this move when it was kind of turbulent and you weren't happy about moving schools, at least the church was almost like a bit of a constant because you could kind of just slot yourself into there. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, no, because
Yeah.
as a member of the church, you're always welcome, like any ward you
Mm-hmm.
go to, and I guess that's a positive about the
Mm-hmm.
community of it.
Yeah, no, that is true. Um,
Yeah.
Around this time in your youth, what was it like being a member of the church in the Netherlands in terms of like at school?
Oh.
Because we've talked about when
Uh.
you were younger at school and the kids maybe thought you were a bit like high and mighty because, as Mormons, we do think we're better than the world. But, now as you're getting older, what is it like to be a high schooler in the Netherlands and also a Mormon?
Mm, well, I went through different periods. I don't like. I remember that after I started going to FSY, for example,
Mm-hmm.
when I was really like in a devout phase
Mm-hmm.
that I would kind of wear it on my sleeve, and I would like bring my scriptures to school, and yeah, I
Yeah,
was like
cool
that,
kid.
and read them there in a corner,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, some of my classmates would look at me and think I was weird. Um, but before that and after that, I think I was mostly ashamed of it. I
Right.
didn't want to mention it. unless someone asked me. And I knew how people saw it, and I knew people thought it was weird, and I didn't know how to defend it.
Hmm. And
So that
how
was
do they see it? How do people in the Netherlands see the Mormon Church?
well. First of all, they don't know the Mormon Church. Most people don't know them.
Hmm.
The Jehovah's Witnesses are more popular here. Actually, they're bigger as well.
Okay.
But those who have heard of Mormonism think we're think they're a cult,
Right.
or like just very fundamentalist Christian,
Hmm.
which is like accurate to some extent.
Okay. And it is. I can imagine the Netherlands, the Church in the Netherlands, not being as culty because you're not
Mhm.
in such a close in group. But what were those sort of cult like elements? Since you brought that up, what are the sort of cult like elements of the church you think were pervasive still in the Netherlands? What do you think? Or
Well,
still being done?
yeah, well, of course, I think the amount of groupthink, which is pervasive like all throughout
Hmm.
the world in the church, is that you're not really allowed to think for yourself. You need to keep within the the boundaries that they set for you and what
Hmm.
the leaders tell you is true, and you can't really think outside that or have any different opinions. Well, if you
Hmm.
want to keep your temple recommend. Um, and other than that, I mean, just in general, like actually strictly going to church every Sunday is weird in the Netherlands
Hmm.
because we're a very secular country. Other than that, and
Hmm.
everyone who claims to be Catholic or Protestant kind of only goes to services around Christmas or Easter. It's not really. It's kind of more like a cultural
Mm.
thing, and not really taken that seriously. Um,
Yeah, because
yeah, so it's a big difference.
my experience with the Netherlands, and I'm sure a lot of people's kind of first
Yeah.
thought about the Netherlands is quite a liberal society, right?
Mm,
People are
yeah.
quite liberal, quite open, and so were you ever viewed as very uptight? I guess because of being a Mormon, that people are saying, "Oh, come on, just try this, just do that," because they're very liberal.
Well, I don't know. I didn't really feel a lot of peer pressure outside the church to
Okay.
start drinking or anything. A
Hmm.
lot of people in my class did start drinking at a young age, around 14 or 15.
Hmm.
Um, and I didn't really go to parties, so I never felt pressured
Pressure that way.
to drink or anything.
Hmm.
But I think I don't know if it was just my personality or if it was the influence that I got from the church that made people feel like I was uptight or anything like that. I'm
Hmm.
not entirely sure why people viewed me like that.
Okay. Well, that's
Yeah.
totally cool. All you can do
Yeah.
is tell your experience. So
Yeah, exactly.
it's just interesting to see how such a liberal society views a very conservative religious group.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're moving through youth. You've moved to this new school, this new ward. So what was the new ward like? Was it bigger, smaller?
From what I remember, I do think it was bigger, and it was more of an international ward, not officially, but the city that it's located in is very, there's a lot of industry and a lot of people, a lot of what's the word, expats moved
Hmm.
there. So we had people from all over Europe and a lot of Americans and British people,
Hmm.
well, some British people. So it was kind of more culturally diverse. Also, a family from Ghana that I
Hmm.
remember.
So did
Yeah.
your dad ease you into this move with any more of his kind of what will be internet famous PowerPoints? Uh, he will be known for those
um,
on the internet.
no, he
But yeah,
didn't give
his
a PowerPoint
PowerPoints.
about this.
Okay.
Oh,
Were there any other
but
PowerPoints around that time at all?
oh yeah. Well, when I was, I think around 11, he gave a PowerPoint presentation about puberty
Okay.
and mostly like sexual education. And it was kind of a weird mix of like scientifically accurate things, like just
Hmm.
human anatomy and all that, like because he was trained as a doctor,
Yeah.
so he thinks scientifically. But on the other side, it's of course but you have to wait till marriage, and sex is for having children, and it's sacred, and it was mixed in with like all the Mormon rhetoric,
Hmm.
and I felt very confused at the time because of that. Um, yeah.
So you could feel the dissonance between those ideas
Uh-huh.
then. Okay. And
Yeah.
what was your reaction? Obviously, we know you landed on the side of still going to church, but what was your kind of, where did you land on that? How did you reconcile that sort of dissonance?
How did I reconcile that dissonance? Like at the time?
Yeah, like at the
Or,
time, like, did you just shove it on a shelf? Did you like go, oh, well,
uh,
you know, we'll deal with it later? Or did you deal with it at the
yeah, no,
time?
I was still young. I didn't really think about it
Hmm.
that much. I was just like, well, this is what this is what I'm taught. It's
Hmm.
most likely true. Yeah, and I just kept living my life. It didn't really impact a
Okay.
lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not that it would. Okay, so we're coming
Mm,
through this early time. You've got your dad giving you PowerPoint presentations about puberty.
mm.
You got, everything coming into this new ward. You're getting used to knowing the new youth and everything. Um, I want to jump onto the. How old were you when the Elder Uchtdorf thing happened?
Oh,
Is this around the right time, or are
yes,
we
I was
getting ahead of
12,
ourselves?
13.
There we go.
Yeah.
Perfect.
No, it was actually before the move, so we've gone
Oh,
a bit too
okay.
far.
Oh,
Yeah.
John won't be happy. Right. Let's stick to the timeline, people. Okay, so you're
Oh
12,
God.
13, and you
Yeah.
encounter an apostle of the Lord. He's in the Netherlands. What's he doing in the
Oh,
Netherlands? Why is he there?
it was a really big deal. He was giving like not a stake conference. I don't know what it was called, but it basically I think it was in Zoetermeer, like the ward close to the Hague Temple.
Hmm.
And it's the biggest church building in the entire country, as far as I know. And so lots of Mormons went there, like from all over the country, to hear Uchtdorf speak.
Hmm.
And he and his wife actually were going to give a talk separately, and then after that there would be a Q&A session.
Okay,
Um, yeah, that's what I remember.
that's what I remember.
And
Cool. And
yeah.
how is he viewed? Just because we're
Oh,
gonna tease this out for the audience. How is Uchtdorf viewed in Netherlands? Because I know here he's our
yeah.
apostle, right? Is it similar there?
Yeah, no, we felt that he was one of us because we're
Yeah.
so close to Germany, of
Uh
course.
huh.
And he's like the only European apostle in
Hmm.
the Quorum of the 12. And I remember my parents really loving him and
Hmm.
being excited to hear what he has to say and really taking it seriously and trying to get us to be excited, but like
Mm.
in a sacred way.
Yeah.
uh,
So notepads and
yeah.
pens at the ready.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely
Yeah.
ready to go to
Yeah.
take note of what he has to say. So they put this big conference on, everyone kind of comes together. So would you say, so you say it's from all over the Netherlands, did it go slightly out of that as well, like into Belgium a little bit, or?
I think it might. I don't remember
Mm,
who was there. I didn't really know anyone from
okay.
Belgium at that time.
But the fact that they can
Yeah.
invite an entire country's worth of people to come see an apostle
Yeah.
versus like a couple of steaks. Right, that tells you
Yeah.
something again about the size of the church in the Netherlands. So, okay, we all get together for this. How was his talk? Do you remember him and Harriet? Do you remember how their talk was? Or
I
broadly
I
what it was
really
about?
I really don't remember what the talk was about.
Okay.
Most of, like what I remember was from the Q&A section.
Hmm. Yeah.
One specific question by this woman. I don't remember who she was, but she asked about God's thoughts on same-sex relationships
Hmm.
and whether gay marriage would be like viewed as
Hmm.
like would be tolerated by the church at some point.
Okay. Before we
And
get to Uchtdorf's answer, I
mhm,
want to know what your thoughts and feelings were towards same-sex
okay.
attraction and same-sex marriage and all that sort of stuff at that time.
So okay, I was 13.
Hmm.
I was very conflicted
Okay.
because generally I'd been taught, being gay or expressing those feelings in, in a physical way is not good, and
Hmm.
that God doesn't like that, and it's not appropriate. Um, it doesn't lead to, eternal marriage, which is what we should all be striving for. Just all the traditional things that you hear.
Hmm.
But around the same time, I think about a week before Uchtdorf came to the country, my best friend, Anne Marie, actually, she's watching right now, so shout out to her.
Hey,
Um,
Anne-Marie.
yeah, so my best friend, Anne Marie, came out as bisexual.
Okay.
Um, and when she first told me, I was kind of in shock, I think I remember. and I was trying to downplay it. Like, are you sure? Like, how did you figure it out? Aren't you like too young to know? Because I didn't know anything about it. And I think at one point I even told her like, oh, it's probably just a phase, which I really regret saying, and I'm sorry once again. But yeah, I was just saying those things because that's what I'd heard from my
Of
parents,
course.
what they'd said about gay people in our not our community or from like on TV or stuff like that. And that's what I felt like I should say, but I didn't really know what my own opinion about it was yet,
Right.
and it was still developing. So when I heard President Uchtdorf say that and saying that it's wrong to be a different sexuality and that God won't allow it and all of that, it felt really conflicting because I really cared about my friend and I didn't think that anything that she was feeling was wrong because there she is.
Says hi.
Yeah, and I didn't think that anything she was feeling was wrong.
Hmm.
Didn't think she was hurting anyone. So why would God think it was bad?
Okay.
And I remember having a few I think discussions with church friends, and I remember saying to them that this is the first time that I've ever doubted the church, and that's the first time that I disagree on a topic. So that's kind of where my doubts as a person started.
Okay. Do you feel like
Yeah.
him saying that actually almost galvanized your position, made your position firm towards that topic? Like you were a bit unsure before, and then you heard him say that, and you kind of reacted, and you're like, "No, I don't agree." Do you feel like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. No, it stuck out really clearly in my mind. Like, no, I don't feel like that's right. I don't feel like that's kind to say.
hmm
Because, once you know, yeah, LGBT people more personally, and you realize that they're just normal people and they're not doing anything wrong,
hmm
and they deserve to be who they are. It's just really hard to continue believing in what you're taught as a Mormon.
hmm Do you
Yeah.
do you feel like beyond you there was a more general reaction to what Uchtdorf said, or do you feel like it kind of went a bit unnoticed?
I don't know anyone who had any kind of reaction to
Hmm.
it. My church friends that I talked to kind of remained firm in their position. They didn't
Hmm.
really change their minds. Um,
Did your parents say
Other than
anything about
that,
it?
I think my parents said they just said that they agree,
Hmm.
and that God might like explain things in the afterlife, and that there's a reason for all of this, I
Hmm.
guess, and just to put it on the shelf.
Yeah, we just
Um,
defer it to the afterlife.
mhm,
Hmm.
yeah, I think that's what I remember them saying. Yeah.
Okay, so it didn't really cause waves. You know, if it were now, people would have recorded it. It'd be online. We'd all be picking it apart.
Yeah.
But I mean, do you know if there is a recording of that? I'm just gonna get it out
Oh,
there
I mean,
because it'd be interesting.
I do remember there being a camera. I don't know
Hmm.
if it was just for like pictures or for an actual video. But
Okay.
I don't know. I tried actually looking for the recording of this, but
Hmm.
I couldn't find any on YouTube.
Well, I'm inviting the viewers now and anyone that watches this afterwards to go out and see if you can find that address. What year was that roughly?
I was I was 13, so let's see, like 2015 or 16,
Okay,
I think.
right. So if anyone can find what Elder Uchtdorf said in 2015-16 in the Netherlands, be super.
Yeah.
Go check that out. Go have a look for that. Okay,
Sure.
so he's planted the seed of disagreement with apostles and with being like, I actually disagree
Yeah.
with something that the
Yeah,
church
because
says.
I thought that I when I heard the question being asked, I thought, okay, so he's gonna give an answer, probably
Hmm.
what I've heard before, but he might give another reason that might convince me, right?
Hmm.
Because if he can't convince me, who can?
Yeah.
That's what I was really thinking. And after that, I didn't feel like it was justified in my mind,
Hmm.
and so I kind of I gave up on it and was like, no, what I think, um, no, I think it's okay, and I'm allowed to have an opinion. That's kind of what came out of that.
Okay,
Yeah.
but you still went to church. Obviously, you then moved. Sorry, we jumped ahead, but you then
Yeah. Yeah.
moved, and you got involved in this new ward in the south of the Netherlands. Um, and what was your church experience like there, moving into the ward? Did you start to get callings? Were you kind of in positions of, were you getting more actively involved rather than kind of just floating along a bit?
Yeah. Yeah. No. I think I was very active in my classes as well. I was asking lots of questions. Like some of them were just regular, others were might have been a bit more controversial. But yeah, so I was engaged in class,
Mm-hmm.
and teachers appreciated me. Then I did get my first calling. I was called as the ward pianist
Mm-hmm.
when I was 14, I think, and I think it was actually there was another guy who was I think he was the institute teacher who was also playing piano.
Mm-hmm.
Like every 2 weeks, I was also doing it every 2 weeks, so we kind of like fluctuated.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I was really excited about it at first because I liked playing the piano, and I've been playing the
Mm-hmm.
piano since I was 8 or 9, and church songs aren't that difficult to play. So I was like, I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I went up there and I practiced a lot. But when I went up there and started playing in front of my ward of, I think maybe 80 people,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, but I just felt just stress and anxiety and just lots of pressure. And I don't know if that's just an internal thing for me that
Mm-hmm.
that I'm not mentally prepared to perform in
Mm-hmm.
front of people. But it didn't make me feel good. And actually, after the last song that I played, usually every Sunday, I would burst into tears
Right.
and go sit back with my parents. Yeah, and they didn't bother asking me whether I wanted to stop with my calling. They just thought, oh, I'll get over it.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't. I think I went on for a few months or almost a year like
Mm-hmm.
that, and it started playing into other things. Like during my piano lessons, I couldn't really bring myself to play or practice as much anymore, and I would also start crying for seemingly no reason.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought through it, and I got up the courage to tell my parents that I wanted to quit my calling and quit piano lessons. Which at the first instance they didn't accept that. They didn't want me to stop.
Mm-hmm.
They were very angry and disappointed with me. But after asking once or twice more and just explaining that I just felt really stressed and I couldn't take the
Mm-hmm.
pressure of it and it wasn't good on my mental health, they decided to let me quit, which was
Okay.
a relief. But there was a lot of hurt between us at that point.
Isn't that amazing that
Yeah.
all that comes out of your 14-year-old child playing the piano or not at church? And,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
not to judge your parents, because I'm sure when that calling was extended to you, it was framed very much in the way of Jesus wants you to come play the piano every week. Right? Was it, or was it not? I don't want to assume if it wasn't, but
Yeah,
was
no,
that
it's
ever.
I did feel a responsibility to,
Mm-hmm.
spiritually feed people because that's what the songs are for, and they have
Mm-hmm.
very like the lyrics are very important, and it's part of the whole frame of the church experience. And so I felt like I was contributing a lot, but I also felt that if I did something wrong or if I played something wrong, that it would ruin the experience and not be as like holy.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I just felt a lot of pressure. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. Imagine feeling a lot of pressure through that. And so when that pressure was taken off and you then able to go just sit in the pews and just relax and just be a 14-year-old at church, what did that do for you?
Well, at that point, I tried to listen to the talks because my parents kind of like once I went to Young Women's, they started saying like stop being on your phone, stop drawing or playing or
Mm-hmm.
anything. You have to listen to the talks. They're important. You'll learn something. Yeah, most of them were just really boring, or I didn't understand the point that the person was getting at, or yeah, it was just not. I'm not the target audience as a 14-year
Right.
old. So yeah, it didn't really do anything for me. It was just something you had to get through.
But you are the target audience of seminary, and at 14 you will have started. Do you
Oh
see that
yeah,
segue? That's a good segue, right?
yeah, it's a
So
good
tell me
segue.
about tell me about seminary and what that was like in Netherlands. Just generally, what is it like to go to
Seminary.
seminary? Where
Okay.
is it? Where is it? How do you get there? How often is it?
Oh well, it's at church.
Hmm.
We started doing it like in my first 3 years of seminary. We did it once a week on Friday evenings. And like so first there's an activity, I think, and then after that we have seminary. So it starts at 7, ends at like 10:30. And yeah, seminary, like we had to do the scripture study by ourselves,
Hmm.
like every day, and then we would discuss on Friday. That was kind of the plan.
Right.
Not every youth had that autonomy to
Right.
or to learn that all by themselves, or the parents to like reinforce them.
Hmm.
I did, and I read my scriptures every day, or at least my assignment every week.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just really fun actually to get together because we had a nice group at that time. I think there were like 5 or 6 young women and around the same amount of young men. Not everyone
Hmm.
would show up every week. I think it would usually be around 7, 6, 7 youth
Hmm.
in seminary and at church on Sunday. And we got along really well, and we kind of fooled around, and it was mostly just a fun time. So I have good memories of the first 2 years or 3 years of seminary.
I'm sorry, that was just the youth in your ward, right? So
Yes,
you didn't have to
yes,
expand out of the ward to get that sort of size
yeah,
class,
and
which is quite good.
it was a church, so most of us were driven by our parents. I was
Hmm.
actually, I think, like a 20 or 30 minute car ride from the church because we
Right.
lived far away from the city, and other people lived in the city, so it was just like a bus
Hmm.
ride or a bike ride to
Bike
them.
ride. Bike ride,
Very
very
Dutch.
important for those that don't
Yeah,
know about the Dutch. They love to ride their bicycles
mm,
everywhere, and it
definitely.
works because they have the infrastructure for it, which is nice. If you ever go to
Yeah, it's
Netherlands,
great.
ride a bicycle. So yeah, I mean, you've got all these kids that'll cycle themselves to church or whatever, but you got a lift, and that was for the first 3 years. What happened in your kind of fourth year?
Mm. Oh, do I have to do all of seminary right now?
Oh,
Because
okay, we'll come
we
back to that. That's
jumping.
fine.
Do you want to
Okay,
come
we'll
back
come
to?
back to that. That's fine. That's
Yeah.
fine. So carry on with
Okay.
seminary. So you were very devout. You were very involved. Um,
Um. Yeah. At least like on the surface, I guess. Yeah, I had some doubts throughout the
mhm.
years. Like the LGBT thing was very important to me, even though I was not. I'm very straight still, and I am cisgender, and so I don't identify as LGBT. But because I care a lot about them, and my best friend is close to my heart. But because I advocated so much for them, like just casually in church, but a lot at home, I had some conversations with my parents,
Mhm.
like arguments and stuff like that. My parents actually at one point thought that I was a lesbian, um,
Right.
because of that, because I care about other people's rights.
Yeah, you couldn't possibly
Um,
advocate for others just for the sake of advocating for others.
yeah,
You've got to
no,
have a
because
personal interest, right?
if you, for example, if you advocate for animals' rights, you must be an animal yourself.
Of course.
That makes sense.
Naturally, yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay,
So
so
that
what
was
were those
funny.
conversations with your parents like? Let's dig into that a little bit if you don't mind.
I don't remember a lot about the conversations
Hmm.
themselves because they're intense, and especially it was mostly with my dad because my
Hmm.
mom is not very confrontational, but my dad is, and he has very firm opinions about things. And yeah, he made me feel kind of guilty for having a different opinion, and
Okay.
like I should just listen to what I'm told because I'll find out later that it was the right answer. So I should just trust that it is right.
Hmm.
Um, Other than that, he didn't really give any like good arguments that changed my mind, obviously. But mostly, yeah, they made me feel bad. Those conversations.
Mm. I can
Yeah.
imagine. I imagine, and that tension between you and your parents then.
Mm.
Because I forget how young you are. Apologies, because I wanted to skip ahead in the seminary. I forget that actually
Yeah.
seminary is 4 years, so we're getting close to the present
Yeah.
day. So let's stay in your kind of mid-teens around this opening time of seminary. So you're having these discussions with your parents more, and how are you finding this kind of point where you're breaking out of orthodoxy? I'd say, the idea that you're challenging your parents on an issue. Did that bleed over into seminary classes? Were you challenging in class as well?
Well, not really until my last year. My
Okay.
last year is also when my faith crisis really started.
Okay. So we won't
But
get to that
before
just
that,
yet.
I mostly kept it to myself. Yeah.
Okay. You kept it to yourself. And were there any other kind of parts of the youth program? We'll get to FSY in a moment, because that's going to be coming up around this time. But are there any other parts of the youth program and the kind of the teachings around youth that you struggled with, or anything you
Yeah.
had kind of thoughts on?
Yeah. Also, around when I was 14, modesty, I didn't understand. Like, I was fine with doing it. Like, I'm not very risque in my clothing choices, like even now. But I really wanted to have a good reason to do things. And the specific rules around modesty just felt arbitrary, and I didn't understand why those were specifically chosen, or if there was a reason behind it. So I think at one point we had a Q&A with our bishop. We would have those maybe every twice a year, maybe, and you could just ask any questions that you want. So I started
Okay.
asking specifically about modesty. I asked, why do we have to cover our shoulders? Because I didn't understand, what's the deal about shoulders, right? So I asked him that, and he said, well, first of all, he said that we have to be modest, not to be a temptation to the young men. So that was the first reason that he gave. So
Cool.
and I didn't feel like that was a valid reason to do that, because I thought the men should be able to control themselves, and it's just a shoulder. But the second reason that he gave, when I kept pressing him, I think, he said, well, the shoulder is, technically speaking, it's kind of the beginning of the breast. So
I'm
that's why
sorry,
you
he said
should
what?
cover it. That's what he said. And I was just as flabbergasted as you are right now. But I just accepted it, like, okay. I just had a poker face on, like, sure. I think another young woman was also like, what just happened?
Because was this a
Yeah.
public forum? Because I'm imagining like your twice a year bishop interview or something, but this is a public
No,
forum
no.
with the bishop.
This was with all the youth. We get together in a room in a circle, and we're allowed to ask the bishop questions for I think half an hour to an hour or something that it
Wow.
was. I don't know if they were. I don't think they were prepared. If you had to send them in or anything, because mine was spontaneous as far as I remember. But yeah, I don't know. That was just our last bishop, because the bishop we had after that didn't really do that, I think.
Yeah, it sounds
Yeah.
like kind of that guy, which is awesome. Like super cool that
Yeah.
he's like, you know what, I'm gonna sit the youth down because
Sure.
youth are important. I'm gonna hear their
Yeah.
questions twice a year. Really cool. But then when his answers are the shoulder is technically the beginning of the breast, I feel like he's clutching at straws. Sorry, something's come to mind. Clearly, tell me about it.
No, that's just it's just ridiculous to think back to it, that an adult man would say something like that. Yeah, no.
But I
So
do
that
want to
was
say kudos to him for that forum, and I think it's a great idea.
it's a good initiative. Yeah.
It's certainly a good initiative for the youth to have that chance to come together
Yeah.
and say what they want to say. So, any other things you remember from those Q&As? Because it feels like there's a lot of kind of good content that comes out of those.
That's the main thing I remember. I don't remember any other questions. Other questions were mostly, tame. They weren't really
Quite
like actual
benign,
doubts that people were having, but like maybe like some technicalities about the scriptures or something about stories. Yeah, I don't think it was much special after that.
I'm not sure I'm going to get over that for a little while. Sorry, everyone. Okay, so let's talk about FSY, shall we? Because modesty standards in the church are one thing, but FSY is like another level, right? So how did you find that jump that FSY was?
Well, it was very, very strict. I
Hmm.
don't know. Yeah, well, it's yeah, because you can't enter. There's like a list of haircuts that you can't have, and a list
Hmm.
of hair colors as well. You can't have bright hair colors, so stuff like that. You can't wear short shorts. Obviously, you can't
Hmm.
show any midriff. If you were wearing short shorts, you couldn't enter like the camp at arrival.
Hmm.
So we'd have to change before that. Or for example, if a guy would have long hair,
Hmm.
they would have to cut it before entering the camp as well. Just
Yeah.
stuff like that. That didn't make any sense
Hmm.
because it's just hair and it's just clothes and it doesn't really impact the value of the person you are.
Hmm.
It
And that
just
was
seemed
the
really
same here.
silly to
Yeah, it was
me, and
ridiculous.
yeah, I did feel that it was ridiculous at the time. That's
Hmm.
mostly like this the second one of the early things that I just disagreed with that I thought were just ridiculous.
Hmm.
And we had this young women's stake president that was really strict with the rules too, mostly for the girls,
Hmm.
because I think we had this like I think almost every day at FSY. I don't know, was it youth conference? I don't know, but you have this like talk from the leaders at the FSY, which is usually like an old couple that kind of leads the whole conference and gives a talk every once in a while.
Hmm.
Um, that's kind of you have to go in your Sunday attire,
Hmm.
and women could only wear skirts and dresses. You couldn't enter the hall that they were doing it in without that. And the women's president was actually forcing girls to wear skirts and dresses, even if they hadn't like brought any with them. She had brought extra
Oh,
for us.
okay.
So she forced us to change, whereas the guys were just allowed to wear jeans and a shirt.
No,
Yeah.
that's okay.
I think
There's
that was
some.
just her. I don't know if that's official, like FSY or youth conference, like rules. I think that was just her.
I feel like FSY can vary so
Yeah.
much depending on who the kind of people are that are running it, but there are some very kind of set
Mm.
standards. I want to ask about FSY, what size it is in Netherlands. Is it just for Netherlands or is it more regional?
It is, I think, the Netherlands and Belgium.
Of course,
At least the
tagging
part, the
Belgium
part of
on.
the part of the stake that is in
Hmm.
Belgium. So it is mostly national. It's a big, big conference. I think there was about like 100 youth in total, but I
In
don't know
total.
exactly. Yeah.
All right. From my experience, FSY was, and we do it by mission in the UK. So
Hmm.
we'd have like 500 youth per mission, and there was usually, or they'd put a couple of missions together. So there was usually three FSYs that went on in the summer, and there was about 500 a pop. So,
Yeah.
um,
No, that was my experience too when I went to the one in Madrid because I went to the
okay.
one in Spain one summer. It was way
Oh,
bigger and way more luxurious. We were in like a four-star hotel or something.
nice.
It's like,
Where was it
yeah,
in the
very,
Netherlands?
very pampered. I think in the Netherlands, well, I think it's either in the south of the Netherlands or somewhere north of Belgium. I'm not sure exactly where it was,
Hmm. But
but
what
yeah,
sort
the
of
one in,
building? Like, what was it? A
oh, it
university
was like,
campus or?
no, it was like, two, I think I remember there being two camping houses. So there's one building that was for the girls, one building that was for the boys. There were like bunk beds and
Oh, okay.
stuff like that. Um, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. There was this whole terrain. There's a little forest and a field and all
And
that
that
to
was
do activities
FSY,
in. I think that's both FSY and youth conference actually.
right?
Yeah, youth
Okay.
conference is more like on a stake level.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think I remember us using the same building a few times.
So you had
Yeah.
young women's and young men's camps. Did you have those as
No,
well,
we
or
always
just
did
the
them
conferences?
together. We always did them together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, and this all sounds very rural anyway. All the conferences going out into fields and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fascinating because we got stuck in a university. It's
Oh,
Nottingham
really?
University in the UK. They stick us in student accommodation. Yeah,
I
and
mean, that
so
doesn't sound too bad.
it's not bad because you got the big lecture halls that we all then go into,
Yeah.
and all that sort of stuff. Uh, Crazy. Okay, so what
Mm.
were your any standout experiences for you at FSY? Anything other than the forced modesty and
Oh.
the dresses?
Well, another weird rule that was enforced um, was the hug rule, because there was this thing, I don't know why exactly, but we weren't allowed to hug the opposite sex for longer than about 7 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know if the counselors were like actually counted when we did that,
Yeah. Who
but
was enforcing
we
this?
weren't. I think the state women's president again.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no, but it was told to everyone, like it was very across the board, like everyone shouldn't do this.
Okay.
And there was like I think I asked a few people, like, why is this the case? This seems very extreme. It's
Mhm.
strange. There was this rumor that 2 years ago, a couple of youths had sex at the camp,
Right.
like in the forest, like in secret.
Hmm.
And to avoid that, they might have set that rule.
Mm.
But I have no idea. But it's just,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Get your
Oh,
stopwatches out. They're hugging. I don't get how
oh,
that stops youth sneaking off into the woods at night. Um,
I
but
don't know. Yeah, it was
sounds.
just, it was the only time that it wasn't enforced was during testimony meeting when everyone was emotional and just hugging everyone.
Hmm.
Other than that, uh, yeah.
Okay, and what were those
Uh,
testimony meetings like? Because I think I've got an idea in my head, but I want to hear it from you. What was that like?
I think my first stuff is why we were sitting in the field. We were, I think, in a few different groups of 20 kids, just sitting in a circle with like a few counselors as well, and we just had to sit there until we felt the inspiration to go and give our testimony, and just we had to go around, and a lot of people started crying, obviously, because it's a very emotional experience, and we were very sleep deprived as well, so that might have added to why we were so emotional. But yeah, you do feel a lot of pressure at testimony meeting when you're sitting in that circle and you're one of the few ones left that hasn't gone. You feel like you should speak, even though you don't. You may not feel that you have a strong testimony.
Hmm.
Um, I felt the same. I didn't want to speak, but I felt like I had to. I ended up giving my testimony about that I'm by nature a skeptical person, but I'm
Hmm.
trying to overcome that. That's what I said in my testimony. That's what I remember.
It's interesting you mentioned sleep
Yeah.
deprivation. I'm pretty sure it comes up in the bite model, depriving people of sleep. Was it intentional, the sleep deprivation, or was it just because you're young people all in the same rooms and you're just staying up late?
Well, I don't know. It's just that the schedule was very jam packed from morning to night, and then at night you're also encouraged to write in your journal and stuff like that, and scripture study, and so I think we went to bed at around midnight, and then we had to wake up again at 6 or something. But of course, some people 6 or 7. But some people, of course, stay up later because they want to talk with the people in the room, and it's just a nice social experience. Um, yeah, that's how we barely got any sleep.
Right.
I tried to sleep as much as possible, but there are other people who actually stayed up until like 4 in the morning,
Hmm.
and then getting even less sleep, and they could barely function. So yeah,
Mm. And John's just said there, he put up on the screen, I'll put it up again. John's saying it
yeah.
makes him really sad that the American church is exporting body shame to other countries.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Because I believe someone else said, we've got someone else, everyone's chiming in. As an American Mormon visiting Europe, I was always impressed at how comfortable Europeans are about their bodies. And we talked
yeah.
earlier a bit about liberal society, but is that very much the case in the Netherlands? Everyone's quite comfortable around each other.
Yeah, I think so. I do. Yeah, I do think I was taught a lot of body shame through the church
Mm.
and through my parents, especially my mom, because she was very concerned about my weight since I was young. And she tried to put me on diets and try to get me to exercise more, stuff like that. And
Nice.
I never felt good about my body. And I,
Hmm.
I actually talked to her a few months ago about that growing up. I didn't feel, like comfortable in my body, and she kind of taught me a way to like hate or dislike myself, And she was like, "Oh, well, that wasn't my intention at all." And I know it wasn't her intention, but that's kind of what ended up happening, which is not great. But and it takes a lot of time to unlearn. But I'm starting to get over it to some extent.
Okay. And do you feel like that would have been quite a shared experience by a lot of youth in the Netherlands, or is that particular to your
I
family?
I am not sure. I think it might be like except for the modesty stuff, which is standard.
Hmm.
I think this might just be my situation, but I'm not
Okay.
sure.
Okay. No, that's fair. That's fair. So you've got these really strict rules that are all being enforced on FSY. Did you ever feel inclined to rebel, or were you a bit too reserved for that, and instead you kind of just went for it
Rebel
in
in,
testimony meeting?
in what sense?
You're
Like
like,
go
I'm
to a party,
gonna
get drunk?
no, no, not that sense. But you're like,
Oh,
you know what? I disagree with the rules, so I'm gonna wear this, and then you get told to
um,
change or.
I think around the beginning of my faith crisis, when I was more like a nuanced believer, I
Mhm.
was toying with the idea of coming to church in a suit.
Cool.
But then I started looking for suits online, and they're very expensive, so I couldn't afford that. So yeah, rebellion is expensive,
That's
I
the
guess.
takeaway.
But yeah.
Okay, but you were still kind of towing the line. But
Hmm.
it's interesting that you said at the kind of testimony meetings that there's that pressure there because everyone else has gone, that you need to get up
Hmm.
and kind of say something. And so
Yeah.
do you feel like it was still sincere what you said, even though there was the pressure to get up there, or.
Well, my testimony wasn't really like the typical like I know this, I know that, like I know the church is true,
Mhm.
I know God loves me. Well, I did say I think I did say I know God loves me, something like
Mhm.
that. Most of it was just about me trying to overcome, my natural inclinations to be skeptical and to doubt things and want proof for things because, of course, that's irrational.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was mostly just about my goals as a believer. Um, yeah, because I was not very secure in my testimony, but I did really want one,
Mhm.
because I felt like I should have one, and I think it would be a, good for me if I did have one because everything else would be much easier to
Mhm.
do. Um, right, and there was this one talk during FSY, I think, and the speakers asked the they asked the whole hall of people because I think all the youth were kind of just were together, and they asked a few questions, and they said a few statements, three statements. Um, I know the church is true. I believe the church is true, and I hope the church is true. I think, and you had to stand up at the one that applied to you. So from
Right.
what I remember, yeah, from what I remember, half of the half of the crowd of people, of youths, stood up at "I know the church is true."
Mhm.
The other half stood up at "I believe the church is true," and I was the only one to stand up at "I hope the church is true," which was a very embarrassing and kind of shameful experience.
Right. Yeah. What
Yeah,
was the reaction?
well, yeah, I was just standing there alone, and the speaker just said, "Well, we're glad that you're being honest, and you have a lot to work on, but we still, love you and appreciate you and the journey, whatever." I don't know what she said, something like that. That seemed kind of like passive aggressive, but also trying to be nice. But like, I honestly think that I was the only one genuinely being honest in that room.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, no, because I remember like the ones who stood up at "I know the church is true" were from the like big devout Mormon families, and they're expected to say that. So
Mhm.
I don't think, or maybe they think they know, but it's not possible to know anyway. It's
Right.
epistemologically impossible.
Yeah.
um,
But it is the language
yeah,
we're
there's a lot of
brought up
pressure.
with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. There's
The,
just the language of certainty that's imposed on you, and I
mhm.
didn't really vibe with that.
Okay. Well, it's super
Yeah.
brave. I mean, people are saying in the comments, we've got Maven saying, "Wow, very brave." She said, I agree. I agree that it takes a lot of bravery to kind of stand out like
Mm,
that. And I think the honesty that takes, the honesty with ourselves, often is one of the first steps towards realizing that I don't just have to go along with all this. I can actually be honest with myself and express that outwardly. Do you feel like this was a bit
Yeah.
of a moment for you, or not really?
Yeah, I do think so. One of the counselors, like after that talk, I couldn't really participate with the activity that was next, because I
Right.
didn't really feel well from that experience. So I just went
Okay.
for a walk by myself, and this counselor came after me, and we started kind of having a conversation about what had happened. And she told me that, it's actually a very beautiful thing to hope, and hope is just, it should be appreciated more.
Mm-hmm.
And your honesty is, and your courage, all of that. So she really made me feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, she kind of helped me for the rest of conference. I don't remember her name, but I really
But
appreciated that she made me feel better.
shout out to her.
Yeah.
But almost have to ask yourself in that situation, right? You think, well, if hope's such a beautiful thing, then why am I feeling like I'm being ostracized for being the one that's hopeful
Yeah.
rather than certain?
Hmm.
Um, Someone here saying, I'm Mormon, but I must admit I've always taken issue with using the words I know. Belief and actually knowing are not the same thing. And that, yeah, speaks to what we were saying about that language of certainty that's kind of enforced, as you put it, is enforced on us from an early age. At what point do you feel like you started breaking out of that language of certainty? When you'd bear a testimony at church or whatever. When did you stop saying, I
Yeah. Well,
know?
I never when I was, I never really bore my testimony at church.
Okay.
I kind of avoided that as much as possible, because I was never comfortable with the I know language. Even if
Right.
I said it, I never really meant it. I was really uncomfortable with it.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I talked to my dad about that, and he agreed with me, which is something that we both had in common, is that certainty is like imposed on people,
Mm-hmm.
and it shouldn't be, because belief is the only thing that's necessary or something. That's what he said.
Right.
And we should just I don't remember exactly what he said, but that's something that's a good conversation that I remember.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really glad about that, because it made me feel better about who I was at the time.
Mm-hmm. And I think
Yeah.
your dad really strikes me as a man of two halves. He's
Yeah,
got that
it's
logical side to
confusing.
him, and that. But it's good,
I
almost
still
good for
feel
you that
like
you got
that.
to see that, right? You got to see that play out. You got to see that
Yeah.
someone could hold those two ways of being.
Yeah, no,
So,
at the time, like, he was kind of an example to me, because I still think he's orthodox
mm-hmm.
as a Mormon, but he has some nuances in his belief that kind of inspired me at the time.
Mm-hmm.
That I wanted to be like him, and to hold those two, like, different concepts together, uh, which is actually cognitive
Mm-hmm.
dissonance. But yeah, that's interesting.
It is for sure.
Hmm.
Okay, so anything else about FSY? Because it sounds very different to experience here in the UK and very different to experience in America.
Well, I think the handbook of activities, or something that we got, is kind of standard across the board. I think it's just
Mm-hmm.
translated. So there's, like, workshops that you have to do about, like, values from for the strength of the youth.
Mm-hmm.
There's talks about things. There's dances. The dances were pretty fine, but you were very kind of forced, as a girl. You were forced to say yes to any boy who asked you, even though you
Right.
didn't feel like you wanted to.
That teaches
So
healthy boundaries, right?
yeah, I felt, there was this one guy at the time who I had previously been friends with, but after he expressed feelings for me, I rejected.
Right.
And after that, he would kind of, try to follow me around. He would kind of stalk me on WhatsApp, which is the messaging, app that we used at the time.
Right.
And he was just being very unhealthy, and trying to get something from me that I, couldn't or didn't want to give him.
Mm-hmm.
I would almost describe it as stalker behavior, even though I don't want
Right.
to go that far. It was just a very difficult situation. I was 14. Yeah, I went on for a year or two.
Okay.
But at the time, the only time that we saw each other was at FSY, or like a nationwide event, because he was from a different state. And, when he always asked me to dance, and at first I always felt forced to say yes. So I did. And it was not the right choice.
Because it perpetuated his kind of almost feeling that he could just impose
even though
himself.
even though I was really trying hard to, set a boundary, which I was not good at the time. But yeah.
So how did that
long
resolve
story,
itself? Yeah.
The feeling, the pressure, or the situation with
The situation.
him. Oh, well, it's a long story, but I think it got really bad at one point, and he got angry with me for something that he thought I had done, but I didn't. I don't know how much detail I should give, but he got angry at me and sent me like 200 messages overnight, and then I blocked him the day after, because we were still like half kind of friends, because we'd been close before. And then there was just like a really awkward thing I didn't know how to deal with after. But then he got really angry with me, then I blocked him. Then he would kind of follow me around at activities, and then I kind of talked about it with my parents. My parents sent an email to his parents, and his parents talked to him, and I think sent him to a therapist, which helped him with his behavior. And long story short, he contacted me, I think 2-3 years later, and he is okay now, and we're on good terms. So, yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Good resolution.
Yeah, it kind of resolved itself like that.
Eventually.
Yeah.
But it's a lesson, I think, in is a broader lesson about setting boundaries amongst youth in the church. And as Jen said in that comment, that it is a widely perpetuated thing that women don't really get to say yes or no to these invitations of social interaction in dancing and things like that. And I don't think that sets up a good standard or a good position for people.
Yeah. And other than that, at the dances, the girls didn't know about this, but apparently there was a competition between the boys of who could get the most girls to dance. So,
that sounds like Mormon boys.
Yeah, once I found out about that, I actually was really, really offended, because I thought, if a guy asks you out to dance, he must like you or think, or appreciate you for some reason. But no, you're just like a number to them. That really bothered me.
And how often were these dances? How often would we be having them?
We had like nationwide dances always, and they were every 3 months, I think 4 times a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's people coming from all over the Netherlands and would they rotate where they were hosted, I assume?
Yeah, exactly.
They'd move around. Okay. That's pretty wild. Not gonna lie. Okay, so I want to go to when you're 15 and you changed schools again. So we're getting to about 15 now. You've come back from some FSYs. You've been through all that. You've stood out. You've dared to stand alone, as Thomas S. Monson said. And
I'm sorry to interrupt. There was one other thing that I did want to mention about FSY. I'm sorry to break your
no, because if I'm moving ahead, then you take me back. That's fine.
Yeah. So there was this one talk that I met that I remember from one of my first or second FSY, and it was this woman who is a mental health worker, and she gave this talk about this girl that she supposedly knew. She talked about, this girl, she was just like you, she was your age, and her parents weren't really around. She had to care for her siblings and all of that. She was just alone in the world. And, one day when she was, considering attempting suicide, she prayed to God and for an answer, for a sign that he exists, right? Because she was not having a good life, so to speak. So she prayed to God for a sign, and he gave her a sign. I don't remember what she said the sign was. But after that, apparently it was a miracle, and her life changed, and she was never depressed or suicidal again. And, everything just fell into place, and then at the end of that talk, she said, like, and that girl was me. Right. So it was apparently autobiographical story. And we were all very inspired by this. It's just such a miraculous story, like, oh, God can do anything, and we can do anything, and we can't be held back by mental health issues or anything like that. And if we just pray, we'll find answers and we'll be like okay again, right? It's like it solves everything. And in retrospect, it's just really messed up to think about, because there must have been a lot of youth at that conference who were struggling with their mental health, right? Because it's quite prominent among youth nowadays. And just to think that they might have felt inspired by that to pray to God for a sign, just like she did, but didn't get an answer. And they might just, that might cause them to give up hope, or, give them the false impression that there's a cure-all for mental health, or not to get like professional help or anything like that. It just really sends the wrong message, I feel like.
No, I agree. I think it
Yeah.
takes people in an already vulnerable position and puts them in a position where essentially they're going to a very unreliable source of help, because anecdotal experience from many members of the church will tell you that prayers don't always get answered, right? Unless you try really hard to manufacture whatever situation happened into the prayer you asked for, right? You can do some post hoc reasoning, and then you can kind of tell yourself that that's what you got. But you're taking some people that are already in a very difficult position, and rather than getting them like proven medical help that they might need, or just professional help, they're like, oh, we'll just pray, and I got an answer, so you will too. And I think it's a dangerous game to play with young people.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Yeah, I think so. Okay. That was worth sharing. Thank you for that. Thanks for pulling me back from trying to run ahead. I'll get better at that. So should we talk about you moving?
Yeah. Well, I
Let's
didn't
go for
move
it.
again. I just changed schools
Change
in the
schools.
same area. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me a bit about that.
Well, the reason that I changed schools was because I was really lonely at the second high school that I'd gone to, and I didn't really have any friends there, and I felt very depressed. So I talked to my parents about changing schools, and they allowed me to. It was in the middle of the school year, so it was very intense because I was not feeling good at all. And the change of school really did help, and I didn't feel as lonely or depressed. I did get some actual friends, people I felt like I could talk to. It was just an improvement, for sure. Yeah.
That's good. Okay. So how did it go, kind of, in terms of making new friends, and did it have any kind of implication on your time at church? Did it improve your time at church? Were they separate worlds?
Yeah, they were separate worlds. I didn't really mix them. Although there was this one teacher at the school who was Mormon, who was from my
Oh,
ward.
interesting.
Yeah, he was a philosophy and history teacher, which afterwards, in retrospect, it's kind of ironic, slightly. But he was a really nice guy. He was the institute teacher at our ward, and I really admired him. And I really admired lots of intellectual Mormons, mostly men that I knew in my ward, and I aspired to be like them, kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you feel like you got there, or do you feel like you surpassed?
Well, no, because once I started studying the history of Mormonism, I was kind of swayed a different direction.
That's
Yeah.
fair enough, but we'll get to that. Okay, so you've got this teacher who's a Mormon. So, did that keep you in check? Did you feel pressure from that?
Well, I was actually in one of his classes, so I just saw him
Like
at
around.
school. Yeah, and people knew him, people liked him. Other than that, no, not really.
And was the fact that he was, did everyone else know he was Mormon? I assume he was openly Mormon.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if the students knew. I do know that other teachers knew, because other teachers would kind of talk about it. My history teacher, who knew him well, would actually talk about that sometimes in class. Mostly just saying that it's kind of weird, and not just like passing comments like that.
Okay, but that didn't encourage you to kind of be more open about the fact that you were Mormon too, or did you still keep it very much to yourself?
Yeah, I did keep it to myself as much as possible. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So tell me more then about this new school of yours.
Well, like I said, I made some friends in class. I felt like they were very welcoming. There was this one friend in my class who I immediately got along with. He
Hmm.
was trans, and he introduced me to this whole group of friends. And we kind of started hanging out together in like lunch breaks and stuff like that, and it was really fun. And I really felt for the first time that I had kind of like fit somewhere.
Hmm.
Um, and so through my friend, I got introduced to them, and among them was my future first boyfriend.
Cool.
Yeah, that I also hit it off with, and I think 2 months after knowing each other, we kind of started dating.
Okay.
Um,
Just before we go to your first boyfriend, I find
mm,
it really interesting actually that the group of friends you started to make involves a member of the LGBT community, which
yeah,
was, one of the first seeds of your kind of faith crisis, things like that. And now you're finding kind of community and belonging in that community, even though you're not like a member of that community yourself.
yeah,
You're
yeah.
not only is your best friend bi, but now there's a trans person in your friendship group as well. Was this causing more dissonance at the time?
Well, at the time, I didn't really know that he was trans. I mean, he had openly transitioned, but it was so convincing to me that I didn't realize until
Okay.
after a while. And then I was just okay with it. I was really happy that he'd find his place, and he definitely felt very comfortable in his skin, and he was just nice to everyone. And he was actually just someone that I aspire to be as well.
Okay.
So, and I just couldn't see how someone like that could be a bad person.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And that's one of the benefits
Yeah.
to being European in the church is we are often surrounded by, if we allow ourselves to see it, we're
Hmm.
often surrounded by people who aren't members of the church, but who are very good people.
Hmm.
Because our social
Yeah.
group isn't exclusively members of the church, we see that, I think, a lot more, that the scary world is actually just full of pretty decent people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay, so one of those decent people in the scary, scary world was your first boyfriend. Tell me about it.
Yes. Oh God, this whole story. um, yeah. So we hit it off, like I said. Immediately started texting a lot.
Hmm.
We had a lot of fun together. It was. He thought it was really funny, which I appreciate. Other than that, he was an atheist, of course.
Hmm.
When I asked him, you have to assume that most youths in the Netherlands are atheists.
Okay.
Um, and I kind of held off on talking about my faith a lot until we got together. Um, yeah, once we got together, I kind of started talking about it a little bit, but mostly kept it to myself because I also wasn't sure about what I believed really, so I didn't want to have to explain like all the weird stuff that I was taught without having a firm conviction in it or knowing how to explain it even.
Hmm.
Um, so I kind of kept that apart as much as possible. And yeah, once we started dating, it was like my first experience dating. I was still 15, so I actually technically wasn't supposed to date, but my parents were kind of flexible on that.
Right. So your
Um,
parents knew.
and my parents did know,
Okay.
but we mostly like they didn't meet him right away because we mostly hung out at his house because not as many rules there, and it's just nice. Yeah, it was just a nice environment.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, of course, we started having like physical feelings towards
Hmm.
each other, and yeah. So I don't know how to start to explain this. Um,
Floor's yours.
yeah, I know. So once we started, engaging with each other physically, like
Hmm.
started kissing and all of that, I was kind of surprised by the sexual feelings that that came with it because I never considered myself a sexual person before,
Hmm.
and so being with him kind of awakened all that in me, and it's just for at first it just really scared me because I'd never seen that side of me before, and I didn't think that it was, allowed, or that it was appropriate to feel those things as a woman, because in church, as a guy, that you're taught that you have those feelings, but you shouldn't express those like outside of marriage and all of that. But as a woman, you're not even taught that you should have sexual feelings, because I think sex is conceived to be as something that is done to the woman by the men, and they shouldn't really have any strong feelings about it either way, I guess. And once I started feeling something like that, I was just like, oh, well, I must be the strange one. I shouldn't be feeling this. And, and so once we started engaging with each other like that, and it got kind of like hot and heavy in some sense, I kind of started having out-of-body experiences. It's hard to explain, because the thing is, I felt so much shame about what was happening in the moment, and that I just didn't feel like I wanted to be present. I didn't want to be responsible for what was happening, even though I did want it to happen. It was all consensual. He really cared about my consent, and that was all. He was a really great guy. But just because of my religious upbringing, I didn't feel like I was supposed to be doing it. I didn't feel like I should be present, like mentally. So I usually checked out, and I felt like I was watching myself from the ceiling, like not really being in my body. It was a very strange experience. I don't know if it's like, if other people have had the same thing. Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. That's going to be really important for lots of people to hear. That the environment in which we grow up as Mormons can give some really unhealthy attitudes towards sex and towards kind of sexual intimacy and just even physical intimacy, because every argument in youth, I don't know, you can tell me, I kind of want to get into your experience of how kind of sexuality was taught in youth, and also how non-members and relationships with non-members were viewed. But I think everything is a slippery slope, right? Like, we're told to stay away, because the moment you even begin to feel something, you'll lose control, and that's it, and you won't be able to stop yourself, and before you know it, you'll be X, Y, Z, right? Everything is 10 steps along before you know it. There's no, well, here's how to control what's going on, or here's how to deal with what's going on. It's like, just shut it off, because otherwise
Exactly.
you're gone.
I definitely felt like I was out of control, because I didn't know what to do with those feelings, because I wasn't taught what to do with them, because I shouldn't have them in the first place. So I felt like I didn't have a grasp on the situation. And if I would have, it would have been a lot easier, and a lot less, a lot less shame or harm would have been involved. But yeah, unfortunately that wasn't the case.
And so did you feel, because was there any sort of stigma around the fact that you were dating a non-member, and did you kind of, even though you've said it was all very consensual, and you were aware that, he wasn't taking advantage of you in any way, do you still feel like it was his fault?
No,
because he was a non-member?
No, I didn't feel like it was his fault, because most of the time I felt like I was initiating most of the contact.
Right.
So I was mostly blaming myself, and I made sure to tell him that it wasn't his fault. And once I started, having those shameful feelings, I kind of, I think I sat him down to talk about it, and I said, like, we should be more careful, because I do have this, this religious conviction to some extent that I want to uphold, and I feel like what we're doing is kind of wrong a little bit. I didn't know how I really brought it to him, and he was really confused, because he thought that I was enjoying it, and I was, but I also felt like I shouldn't do it, and it was just, it was very strange. It was difficult, for both of us.
That sounds pretty difficult. And so he sounds like he was understanding, obviously, but there is this need in Mormonism to go to someone other than the party involved. Did you feel need to go see the bishop? Did you feel need to confess to your parents, speak to them about any of what was going on?
Well, at first, no, I didn't feel like I wanted to tell my parents about any of it because I felt really guilty. I just wanted to handle it by myself and get like control over what was happening and my feelings around it. But at some point, my parents started suspecting because, I'd stay away after school for long hours, even though I hadn't told them that I'd be gone or something like that. So I think after I went to bed a few times, they started looking through my phone and looking through my messages with him. And which is, a big invasion of privacy that I didn't expect them. I didn't expect them to do that. I actually didn't have a lock on my phone at the time because,
Right.
I didn't expect that they would do anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But they found some texts that they deemed inappropriate, and they sat me down and they got really angry with me, and they demanded, all the details about the situation and what I did with him and all of that. And at one point, my dad got so angry with me about what I had done that he took my phone and he smashed it on the floor. And then after that, he didn't allow me to have a new one for 3 months, and I was grounded for the summer. It was very intense.
Did you confront the invasion of privacy with them? Did you say, like, why were you looking at my phone, etc.?
No, because I
Okay.
didn't feel, they're in a position of power and of authority. I didn't feel like I could challenge them in that
Mm-hmm.
sense. If they feel justified to do that, then I guess they have the right to. That's what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I did feel like it was kind of messed up of them to do that. I just didn't feel like I could hold them accountable at all.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's really interesting that they have that ability to kind of almost create a situation where even though you feel like what they've done is wrong, you can't call them out on it. You can't be like, nope,
Yeah.
that's
No.
not cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so did that end that relationship then?
Well, so this was right before the summer when I was 15.
Mm-hmm.
So we always go to Spain every summer, so I couldn't see him anyway, and I didn't have any way to digitally contact him. So I started sending him letters, like actual letters on paper, which
Cute.
is very cute, and it
Yeah.
started out as like a romantic thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that summer I also went to FSY in Spain that year in Madrid, and just all these feelings about the shame and guilt about what I had done and all of that. Also, before leaving for the summer, my parents had sent me to the bishop to
Mm-hmm.
confess.
Right.
I'm
So that
jumping
wasn't a
back. I'm
voluntary
sorry.
thing. No, that's fine. Please.
They kind of asked me like, do you think it would be appropriate for you to go to the bishop? But they phrased the question in a sense that I should go. So I
Yeah.
was like, I guess I should. Yeah, I will. So I went, and my bishop at the time, he was a sweet guy, and I kind of told him that I had, I think, physically transgressed with my boyfriend, but I didn't tell him any details. He just asked me like, "Did you have sex?" And I said no because we hadn't.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all that he needed to know. He didn't ask any further details, which my dad had done. But I was
Mm-hmm.
very grateful that he didn't pry any
Mm-hmm.
further because it was already very uncomfortable and I didn't want to be there.
Mm-hmm. Was
But
it just
in
you
the
and him
end,
in the room,
it
or?
was just me and him.
Okay.
Yeah. In the end, he told me that I couldn't take the sacrament for 6 weeks, I think, and that was my punishment, so to speak.
Okay. How did you feel about that?
Yeah. Well, at the time, I was like, oh, well, that's not such a big deal. But when you're there at sacrament meeting and you have to decline the sacrament, it feels like people are watching you and asking like, oh, what did she do?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd seen the same thing with my dad a couple times, who also had to decline the sacrament,
Mm-hmm.
and it just feels like a shameful experience to have to do that.
Well, I can't imagine that it's
Yeah.
not kind of designed like that because it is a public display of an ordinance,
Hmm.
and you're essentially saying to someone, well, because of what you've done wrong, you can't participate in this public display, so people are going to see and notice. So I can't get how someone hasn't thought that through and gone, well, this is clearly a public indication that someone's done something wrong. So if we want these things
Yeah.
to be private, maybe we shouldn't do it that way. It clearly seems okay in the playbook, as it were. Okay, so you're writing letters, so you've gone to the
Yeah.
bishop, you were in a room on your own as a 15-year-old with the bishop, and he was asking you about your sex life. I mean, there's podcasts upon podcasts about why that's not okay,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
not cool, and the church needs to do better on that, frankly. They need to stop asking us questions, and they shouldn't be alone in rooms with children. So you're writing these letters, and how is that affecting the relationship being this separate?
Okay. Well, the thing is, I couldn't send them like one by one. I had to send them all at once. So we didn't really have any contact at all. Like it was a one-way street. So I went to FSY there, and I was already feeling a lot of sexual shame, and I was just feeling a lot of self-hate around the situation with my boyfriend, and I felt terrible. I felt depressed, and FSY, I thought it would make me feel better, but it emphasized those feelings of that I was a bad person for what I had done, and just made me feel worse. But at the same time, it kind of broke me down in a weird way, in a sense that I felt like, what, I need to do better, I need to change. And so I made a commitment at that FSY to change my ways as a person, kind of as a repentance. And so I started from that point on sending him letters about like, hey, I think what we did was wrong. I want to change as a person. I kind of started telling him more about my religion and my faith. And some letters went really in depth, and some letters were also very, when I think about them now, they're kind of problematic and concerning, because I started talking about, sin and about Satan and all of that. And yeah, just the fact that I felt like such a bad person for doing something that's so, naturally human, that doesn't hurt anyone. It's really unfortunate to think about now. But yeah, I sent all those letters, and also in a hope to get him to better understand me and my situation. And he didn't know what to do with them, really. When I went back, he kind of stopped speaking to me, but well, we did see each other every day, but it was just really, really awkward, and he didn't know what to do. And I don't really blame him necessarily, because it's a difficult situation, and I can see that he felt like I changed overnight, because of kind of the indoctrination at FSY and all of that. And then after that, after I think 2 or 3 weeks after I got back to school, I told him, hey, we should have a talk about this, meet me after school. And then we talked, and he was like, I feel like we should break up. And then we broke up, and that was the end of it. So.
Because I feel like if we were to look statistically almost at your communications with him, say, take your texts and take your letters, right? The amount of Mormon-specific jargon and kind of like Mormon buzzwords and keywords and things that are very specific to the Mormon faith, I think would have skyrocketed, I can imagine.
Yeah, no, he must have felt
concepts that he just doesn't.
Yeah,
have
he must have felt
to.
so freaked out, because I was like a completely different person all of a sudden, and yeah, I totally understand why he wouldn't know what to do with that. So yeah,
and it's almost like he's being chastised from a perspective that he can't really understand, because it's a poor guy. Poor guy. And it's not your fault that you're in this situation where, because FSY is built around conformity. It to my mind, is built around making sure everyone's dressed to a certain standard, everyone's hair is the same, everyone has only got one set of earrings in, all this sort of stuff. It's built to try and create this harmony that is conducive to then these large public kind of manifestations of uplifted emotion, to try and get everyone feeling the spirit and all that sort of stuff. So you're in that environment that tells you what you've done is wrong, and rather than being able to say, well, okay, it's wrong according to this religion, but I can take myself away, you can't escape the drive. Everything around you is driving you to need to be like these people around you, I would imagine. Just from my experience at FSY, certainly.
Yeah, no, that definitely feels like that. Yeah.
Okay, so you that relationship ended, and what was the kind of the fallout from that? What was the kind of the fallout, the wreckage that it left behind?
Yeah. Well, it definitely broke my heart. It was really difficult. And since, we had the same friends and I didn't feel like I was comfortable being around him, I started avoiding him and his slash my friends for the
Hmm.
rest of, that school year. And so through losing that relationship, I kind of lost my friends as well.
Hmm.
Which was unfortunate. But other than that, when people started asking him about, why we broke up, I heard from one of our mutual friends that he had told her that we'd broken up because I was too religious.
Hmm.
That's what he had told her apparently, and I felt really hurt after that because I think after that is when I started being known as the religious girl,
Hmm.
kind of around school, and it wasn't a fun experience. Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
it's all part of this thing where Mormonism kind of can otherize you. And I think this is one of the things I really want to shine a light on through these podcasts and through you sharing your story and Europeans sharing their story, is that when you're the only
Hmm.
Mormon around, it can be really easy to fall into the us versus them narrative and have it really affect your life. When the us versus them narrative is you versus um, some unseen outside world because everyone around you goes to the same seminary class as you, it doesn't have the same effect as when you're the only one in your school
Yeah,
and you feel
yeah.
like you have to withdraw yourself because of Mormon experiences. And we've just had up on screen someone saying that it's a real shame how the church shames developmentally healthy relationships, and it's a good point too. Is that what you were taking part in essentially is the beginning of your sexual development, right? You're learning about your sexuality with other people, and the church has put a shame on that and making you feel bad about that, and that's not going to create a healthy sex life further down the line.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you're kind of isolated now, at least for the rest of this school year, away because you've just come off a summer, so you're then going through that school year. So what does that put
Hmm.
you at? About 16 or so?
Yes, yeah, I
Yeah.
was 16. Mhm.
Okay, so what's 16-year-old Christina? Because that was only 2 years ago. What's
Yeah, I
16-year-old
know.
Christina up to?
God, it feels like so long ago, like
Hmm.
all of this, which is really funny because I'm so young. But 16-year-old me, I was well right after FSY was when I was most devout.
Hmm.
But that usually like kind of starts kind of declining after a few months.
Hmm.
And my parents would really hammer down on that I should keep reading my scriptures and keep praying and keep being the person that I was in after the summer.
They want you to
But
ride
it's
that elevated
right
emotion
the wave.
wave. Yeah.
Yeah, but after a while it's just not sustainable, I
Hmm.
think, and there's no. Yeah, so I went through periods and waves of doubt and devotion, kind of. So that's where I kind of was at 16. I think 16 was also when I started kind of looking around more on YouTube, and that's actually when I first discovered the channel Zelf on the Shelf, I think.
Cool. So
Yeah,
16-year-old Christina's watching Tanner and Sam.
Sam. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. No, at first I just thought they were very funny, kind, lovely people, and I loved how welcoming and open minded they were,
I can
and
attest
I
they are. They are
yeah,
very
they
funny
are.
and kind people.
And I think at the time their content was not really, well, as much as I remember, focused on ex-Mormonism, or maybe I
Hmm.
just tuned it out. I really appreciated their personalities, and
Hmm.
any kind of ex-Mormon facts that they would mention, I kind of put on the shelf and I didn't really think about at the time.
Okay, so you're looking
Yeah.
at them through a believing lens still
Yeah.
because their kind of vibe essentially gels with you,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you're like, well, I'm going to ignore the Exmo bit of it. These are just people that kind of have lived my experience too, and I'm kind of vibing off that rather than the factual nature of what they're doing. Is that a correct kind of way to put it?
Yeah. Yeah, that is
Okay.
correct.
How did you feel comfortable doing that? Like as a member, because one of the things I'm always really curious about is how do believing members engage with content like mine, like Tanner's, like
Oh,
Mormon stories. How do you get into that position where you're open and comfortable hearing it,
yeah.
even if you're not ready to hear the Exmo bit yet?
Honestly don't know. Like I think about it now and I'm like, well, how didn't I realize? I think it's just that I tried to tune it out. And other than that, they're just two people and they're
Mm-hmm.
not like a reliable source in the sense
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, people say. And so I felt like, well, maybe that's just what they think and what they believe about the church history, but it might not be entirely accurate. And so I just kind of rationalized that in a way,
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't think it would be as bad as they said, and it ended up being as bad as they said.
And so I'm sorry, if I
Mm.
missed it, I apologize. How exactly did you come across their content?
I don't know. YouTube's like algorithm. I don't know what they do. I
All hail
think,
the YouTube algorithm.
yeah, I think I started watching like a few atheist videos here and there, like making fun of Jehovah's Witnesses, for example.
Okay, so it's like enemy
Right.
of my enemy
So,
is my friend, kind of like, well, we're all mocking the Jehovah's Witnesses, so that's
yeah,
cool.
in a sense, I don't know.
No, I'm kidding.
I
I'm
think
kidding.
that's maybe how it got recommended to me.
Okay.
But yeah,
But okay, again, I'm just curious. Sorry if I'm like a dog with a bone with
that's
this. I'm just
okay.
trying to work out this point at which you feel comfortable engaging with this sort of stuff. I mean, we've established through the conversation so far that
Hmm.
you and your dad really are people that have this logical side to you, that you can hold these two positions and that you can kind of sit with some of that dissonance to it. You
Hmm.
can tolerate it quite well. But I'm just wondering how the scales got tipped, how you ended up deciding to engage with that other side, that other world.
Yeah. Well, I spent a while in that place of cognitive
Hmm.
dissonance. I think about a year or a year and a half. It wasn't until I was 17 that I actually started like looking into church history
Hmm.
seriously. But how I got to that point, uh,
Even at 16, yeah.
yeah. Let me think for a little bit.
Yeah, no worries. Take a
Yeah.
moment. I'm just going to read Maven's comment while you're having
Yeah.
a think. Maven's saying that this happened to her too. It was safer to look at the problems of other religions, but then there starts to be a bit of overlap. But again, the question is, how did you come to the point where you're like, I'm going to have a look at what's wrong with Jehovah's Witnesses today? Like,
Oh, Jehovah's Witnesses. Oh,
you
well,
know, or
that's
whatever it
kind of
might be.
because I think just people at school and, it was kind of hip at the time, like around, I think, I don't know, 2018, 2019 or something, to be kind of like a rationalist atheist. And the content was also popular on YouTube at the time. I think
Okay.
I just kind of got into it a little bit, and I started relating more and more to the things that they said, and I started having more and more like smaller to bigger doubts about the church and the culture and the doctrine. Um, yeah, I
Because
think the
I was at
first,
university during that time,
yeah,
and that was quite
yeah.
popular here too.
Oh, okay.
As
Then I
things like
think
I'm a
that's it.
skeptic and
Yeah,
genetically modified atheist, all that sort of stuff. That's all like
that is what I
getting
watched.
popular. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you
Um,
can laugh at these videos about Atlantis and all that sort of stuff, if you've not seen
mhm,
Armored Skeptics videos on Atlantis, it's a wild ride. Go check that out. Um,
yeah.
so okay, so I think we're getting there. Then you're kind of able to look at this stuff, and then through the
Yeah.
algorithm, Zelf arrives.
Um, I
But
think
carry on.
one of the first things that kind of fell for me was, everything about the Old Testament.
Hmm.
Just learning more about that and seeing people debunking it on YouTube about how ridiculous it is. At the story of Adam and Eve or the flood or anything like that. That is just impossible that it could have happened.
Hmm.
Right. And once I started thinking about that, I was like, yeah, okay. I could accept that it didn't happen literally. So I started becoming a more like metaphorical believer because I saw like a space in that. But then a lot of tension started happening between me and, my fellow Mormons, my teachers, my parents, because I talked to my parents about, Old Testament stuff and evolution and all that. And my dad said, like, he did believe in evolution, but, he believed that God caused it some way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, yeah, but how could that have happened? And at the same time, he also believed in Adam and Eve literally. So I was like, how can you hold that together? Like, I can't see a way that could make sense. And yeah, like for him, it was just, well, I choose to believe anyway. And for me, well, I just need a better reason than that. Yeah.
As if you're getting into this rationalist sort of headspace, then yeah, you're going to be very much like, well, I need a reason for this. I need some logic here because I'm watching all this other stuff and it's logical and it's speaking to that logical part of me. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. Oh, and also important around this time, during like when I started thinking about things more logically and I wanted to have like reasons to believe things, my parents started telling me that, well, Christina, you're feeding your logical side a lot, but you should also feed your emotional and spiritual side, because it's not good for you not to be spiritual or emotional, especially since I'm a woman and I should be less logical in that sense. And the one thing that they hammered on is that I should listen more to my heart than my mind.
Right.
That's what they kept telling me, even though like a lot of what my opinions at the time, especially surrounding, the LGBT community or, for example, feminism, stuff like that, and just social justice in general, those all stem not only from a logical perspective, also an emotional perspective.
Yeah.
And I just feel like they were completely downplaying that. And it really hurt me to hear every time because it felt like they were gaslighting me.
Well, it's like, listen to your heart as long as it enforces what we want you to think, because your heart is what got you into trouble with your first boyfriend, right? Your feelings, right? Not your logic, your feelings were what put you in that place. So the heart is a fickle thing, frankly, and you do need both.
Yeah.
And you can't say, well, you need your heart, but only when it does what we want you to do. And you need your logic so far as you come to the conclusions that we want you to.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't work like that. Okay, so you're 16, you're watching Zelf on a shelf. Tell me a bit about kind of how Zelf made you feel. You said they were kind of welcoming people. I can attest to that. Very funny too.
Yeah.
But how did they make you feel?
When I started watching them, I just felt like they were kind of hippies, but in a good way. And it was something that I hadn't really encountered before, and just the way that they talked and the way they interacted with each other, it was just like, yeah, that's what I want, really. I realized that it just felt, yeah, I don't know how to describe it, because I also I shared the content with my best friend that I mentioned before. She also started watching them, and she also really liked them, so we got into it together. And it just, I don't remember like specific things that I thought about them or their content. I just really like them as people.
Okay. And that kind of, I suppose what that will do for you is like take away the demonization. Yeah.
Destigmatize ex-Mormonism. Because before that, you're taught that ex-Mormons, people who leave the church, they're bad people for this and this and this reason. They just want to sin, or they didn't try hard enough, stuff like that. But I did hear Sam and Tanner's stories about why and how they left, and that they were devout believers beforehand. So that really changed the stereotype that I had in my mind of ex-Mormonism, and really I stopped antagonizing them. They're just people just like we are, kind of thing.
Okay. Well, and I guess in the same way as your bishop said, the shoulder is technically the beginning of the breast. Sam and Tanner were technically the beginning of your faith crisis, right?
I suppose. I guess you could say that.
They were the gateway drug for you to kind of experience ex-Mormonism. But you said that you had kind of put the ex-Mormon part on the shelf. So how did that time between encountering them and then full-blown research that you said happened about a year later, how
Okay.
does that time look?
Well, I started disagreeing with a few more things. Not really on the church history side because I didn't really know a lot about that specifically yet. I knew a few things vaguely, but I didn't know if they were true or not. But specifically around, like I said, LGBT rights, feminism was really important to me. Like the sexism in the church really, really bothered me, especially surrounding the priesthood. And yeah, I actually talked about that in seminary a few times, and I started an argument once, which was not a good idea because there's like 8 people against you, and they're not going to side with you, and anything you say just sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, but you've shown you're not afraid of like standing out and pushing out against the trend. So
yeah, because I didn't frame it as a confrontation. I just asked the question, like, why is it, like, for what reason do men have the priesthood and women don't? Right? And because it's normal and it's like that's the thing in the church, but there's never a reason given for it. So I wanted to have some kind of reason for it. My teacher started going on about, that women don't need it because they're already so righteous, and men do need it to learn like how to be more spiritual. And just I didn't think that made any sense, because I, as a woman, didn't feel like the pinnacle of spirituality or anything at the time, and I didn't feel like you should put men who are like spiritually incompetent at the top as like leadership. Like it didn't make sense logically either, and it felt really condescending because it's benevolent sexism. And yeah, I never felt like that was right, but everyone else agreed with her, so I didn't know what else to say, really.
That's a solid point to be making at 17. Yeah. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, and something else that she said in that conversation, my teacher at the time, that was my last year of seminary, I think third and last maybe. She was from England. She was a British Mormon.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Because we were having seminary in English since we have so many international people in our ward. Right. So most of our, like, all the sacrament meetings were translated to English through headsets, and all the lessons were, like, for the youth, were given completely in English.
Yeah.
So that's special.
Can I point this out to the audience, right?
Sure.
Okay. The reason that at this point Christina has actually given me a word I couldn't think of in English, right? This is the point we're at. This is like Christina's third language, and we're having a really great conversation. The Dutch are incredible at learning English, right? I don't know of another country where they speak English as a second language so well as the Netherlands. And so it doesn't surprise me at all that you're having your seminary lessons in English. When I went there to church, everyone could speak English to me. I tried to speak Dutch for a day, and I met one person who couldn't speak English and didn't immediately revert to English to speak to me because it's easier for them to speak English with me than it is for me to speak Dutch with them. So that the international audience need to know that the Dutch are incredible at speaking English.
Thank you. Yeah, but I mean, most of the youth were really, really good at English, or were English American themselves, or we had an Italian and a few girls from Ghana, and but there were like 2 people. I think the younger kids who weren't as proficient in English, so they did really struggle with the lessons. So the teachers did have to translate for them, which should be provided, obviously, because we're in the Netherlands. Other than that, mostly, everyone can speak English pretty well. Oh God. Everyone can speak English pretty well except for, the elderly, which makes sense. Other than that, you're correct. Yes.
Yeah, it's quite intimidating actually, sometimes. So you're standing up in seminary because we've got on a tangent here, but you're standing up in seminary. You're really starting to go for it.
This was when it was online. This was in 2020 during the pandemic. So it didn't feel as, intimidating as doing it in person necessarily. And, afterwards, I did get really upset, but I could like turn off my screen because I wanted to cry.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay. And I mean,
so
you
yeah.
mentioned the pandemic. Essentially, you're an ex-Mormon of the pandemic, right? This is when it
Mm,
was all going on. Can you tell me a
yeah.
bit about how the pandemic played a part in this kind of lead up to your faith crisis?
Well, I think, we were in the pandemic and at first we weren't really having church online at all. They still had to figure out how to do that.
Hmm.
And I kind of started looking into more things and actually started going on Reddit more,
Hmm.
on
It's
different
dangerous.
subreddits. Yeah, mostly I think at first r slash Latter Day Saints and r slash Mormon, which are mostly
Hmm.
towards the believing side. Well, the latter is a bit more mixed.
Hmm.
But I started encountering some different ideas there, and I felt like I could express my own ideas there because I always could find someone that was like-minded, and I
Hmm.
felt more accepted and like I wasn't crazy, which really helped.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and that like after a while, you start encountering people actually start posting actual sources for things.
Hmm.
For example, like Fair Mormon is one of the first things that I started looking into, which is an apologist website.
Hmm.
And so, for any questions that I picked up on that subreddit, I would just go there and figure out like what was true about it and how to reconcile it because that was still my main focus. I still wanted to find a way to fit it into my faith and
Hmm.
because I wanted to believe because it's the easiest thing, because I didn't feel like I had any other choice since I was still underage and my parents, I felt like they would still force me to go to church no
Hmm.
matter what. So I was just desperately trying. And so I started looking into more sources and finding out about the history about Joseph Smith, polygamy, and the history of racism,
As this is November
all
2020,
of
right?
this.
That's the
I think
time.
yeah, it's like that's when it kind of started really getting intense, and
Okay.
it's snowballed from
Hmm.
there. That is also November 2020 is the time that I found your channel, um,
Sorry.
because that's when you started, right? I think
About
like
there, yeah, yeah.
I was with you since the beginning, which is really cool. So we've gone full circle, I guess.
Yeah.
But before that, I had already started listening to Mormon stories a lot,
Hmm.
to Mormon discussions with Bill Reel and RFM, and just I was devouring all this content, and it
Hmm.
was just so much information that a lot of it didn't even like process at first. So I had to hear it a few times to really realize like the gravity of what it was
Hmm.
and how to like deal with it. And it's yeah, it's just a lot happens in your brain at that time,
Mm.
and you don't know what to do with that. It's just really
And
crazy to
in a
think about it
pandemic
now.
is a time when a lot of this will start to happen because you have more time on your hands, right? You're at home a
Yeah,
lot. You're not going out and about. Um,
yeah.
this sort of isolation you talked about earlier, where you kind of withdrew from your friends and you might have felt a bit isolated at church, I suppose, because you're becoming a bit less orthodox, a bit more heterodox.
Yeah, yeah.
Did that form part of what drove you to look for kind of a resolution because you've got a foot in both camps
Mhm.
and neither camp is serving you?
Yeah, no, yeah, I felt like because online there's a lot of, there's true believing Mormons and then there's,
Hmm.
hardcore ex-Mormons and there's not a lot of space between that. I mean, there's some
Hmm.
nuance. Um but it's just I didn't know where I fit and I had to figure out um what I wanted to do and who I
Hmm.
wanted to be really. But at first I was really fighting to stay in the church because I wanted to be, like everyone else to fit in and to like have a life and friends and,
Mm.
a community because I did appreciate the community that was in the church. Once I started becoming a bit different, it didn't feel as safe or reliable or like understanding. And I wanted to get back to that place, so I started looking for answers to reconcile everything that I was feeling. But I couldn't really find anything that
Mm.
would change my mind.
And what did you make
Yeah.
of the apologists? What was
Well,
your experience with them?
I think that was around January 2021. that I was watching Mormon Stories a lot, and at that time, I think a series of interviews with apologist Jim Bennett came out.
My man
Him
Jim.
discussing the CES letter, which I think I hadn't read because I mean there was so much controversy around it that I was like, oh, I shouldn't read that, you know. I only read it later after I'd fully like transitioned. But I heard him debunking the things that, well, trying to debunk the things that were in it, and arguing with Jim Bennett. And I also listened to his discussions with Bill Reel. I listened to all of them twice, so I was really,
Nice.
they're really long, but I was really serious about all of this, and I
Okay.
was trying to figure out like if I could find some things to kind of rationalize or reconcile, if like if I make this concession then maybe this makes more sense, and
Yeah.
trying to give the church the benefit of the doubt. But just those interviews kind of because having everything just packed together like that, like everything that is wrong with the history of Mormonism, it kind of shatters you, because there's no way that the church could be true given that all of these things are true. Right. It's crazy
It's the
because
sheer weight of it, it seems.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's so much. And he, you know, he really did his best. Like Jim really tried his best defending it, and you know, he's the best apologist that I've found up to date. And some of his points, you know, I can appreciate, but just having it all stacked together is just, it doesn't make Mormonism as a belief sustainable.
Yeah. And I want to say
Yeah.
massive kudos to Jim Bennett for coming on the show and being willing to have that conversation.
Yeah. No, he's a great guy. Yeah.
It's great for that, and you can feel the sincerity in Jim Bennett. He's trying really hard.
Yeah.
And you're right. And one of the things I started with my channel was that, you know, apologists will get some hits sometimes, right? They will
Yeah.
get some. They will point out if someone has, you know, leapt a little bit far, and they've gone, well, actually, guys, let's pull this back. But like you
Yeah.
said, it's the weight of all of it, and it's what I think the CES letter actually does quite well. Assuming you went on to
Yes.
read it, it
Yeah, I
just
did
puts it
after
all
that.
together, right? And it's all there, and it's the weight of it all. It's the pattern that you start to see. It's like when you're calling out the church leadership for lying, you look at one dishonest behavior and you think, oh, okay, well that's just a one-off. But then when you
Yeah.
see that they all lie multiple times, you're like, well, okay, is this a broader pattern I have to pay attention to now? Okay, so I put my channel
Yeah.
out. You saw that. You were watching Zelf. You're watching Mormon Stories, all that sort of stuff. How did that affect your relationship with your parents, with your church friends? What's the impact of this faith crisis you're going through?
Well, yeah. Well, it started really changing me as a person, and the way that I viewed things, obviously, and that of course has a big, you know, influence and impact on how you interact with others. And yeah, it started to create a lot more tension. And you know, once I started leaning more, you know, ex-Mormon, once I started leaning more like, oh well, this is very likely like not true. Um, I kind of shut down. I stopped interacting with a lot of people, stopped arguing at all, because I could see that it was pointless. Whereas before, I thought that maybe I could change people's minds, or maybe they could come up with a better answer. I actually, at the time, when I was still in seminary, when I was desperately looking for answers, I asked my bishop if I could also attend institute early, because I figured that, you know, maybe there will be answers there that could help me,
Yeah.
but there were not at all. So I attended like 4 classes, and then I gave up on it because it really didn't help at all.
It's like that milk before meat thing, right? And I suppose you were thinking, well, maybe the meat's just around the corner.
Yeah.
And you realise that the meat is never actually there. It's all milk. Which, I mean, you're Dutch, so you love milk, right? Milk is a large part of the Dutch diet.
Yeah, sure.
But, you know, joking aside, there is that element, isn't there, of that, well, it will come next. If you're just patient, if you just endure, it will come next. But I think what you were maybe seeing was that actually there is, that you can start to see the man behind the curtain in Oz. You know, there's nothing there. There's no more substance that you could
Yeah, and I
Crap.
totally expected there to be,
Mm-hmm.
because that's why I wanted to be moved up to institute, because I thought there'd be answers there. And I knew that the institute teacher, which was the teacher at my school, was a very intelligent guy, and he had a PhD
Mm-hmm.
in philosophy. And I was like, well, if he believes it, then there must be a good reason for him to,
Yeah.
right? Because my parents also kept hammering down on the idea that, there are way smarter people than you that still believe in Mormonism. So why can't you?
Yeah.
And so it's also a kind of like gaslighting that I experienced.
Such a bad meme, such a bad idea that's so
Yeah,
pervasive. It's like, well, so and so believes it and he's really smart, so just trust him. It's like,
yeah,
well, he's either not being fully honest with himself or he is so good at compartmentalizing that, he's able to live in
yeah,
these two worlds. But people have to understand that for some of us, that doesn't wash.
yeah.
We,
No, the
we
same thing.
can't do that.
Yeah, the same thing with my grandpa,
Hmm.
who is a professional anthropologist. Yeah, when you look at the like the lack of evidence for everything that happened in the Book of Mormon, like through like archaeology, anthropology, all of that,
Hmm.
it's there's no way that the Book of Mormon could ever be true. Like, how could my grandfather still believe in it? That's
Hmm.
the question that I started having. And it's just, I come from like my Dutch family is kind of intellectual in a sense, and
Hmm.
they're known for that. I remember at FSY there being this one of the leaders there who knew me through my grandpa and my dad, and she was, oh, you're
Hmm.
going to be a fickle one. That's what she said. She knew I was going to be difficult because of
Yeah.
them, because they're still believing, but they're
Hmm.
just a little different than everyone else in a sense. I don't know
Hmm.
how to describe that, but
No,
that's
that
kind of,
makes perfect
yeah,
sense. I think
yeah,
there's a lot of people will know someone like that in the church that's got that
mm,
reputation for being a little bit edgy, a little bit kind of like they'll ask the difficult questions in class, but and they're the
yeah,
ones that allow a lot of other people to switch off and go, well, there's someone here more intelligent than me
yeah,
who asks the difficult questions. They're into the deep doctrine and they're
yeah,
still in, so it's fine.
yeah. No, my dad never really directly challenged the church, like
Hmm.
mostly the culture. For example, the whole he was against the whole idea that the elders quorum have about being better than Relief Society,
Hmm.
because of the priesthood. And he said, well, the Relief Society actually follows through on all their service projects, and they actually help people. What are
Hmm.
we doing? That's what he said in elders quorum, and everyone except I think it was a second counselor for stake presidency
Hmm.
that was also there, disagreed with him, but the counselor did agree with him. So he
Hmm.
was kind of in a minority in that sense, and I applaud him for standing up
Hmm.
for that. Also, a smaller thing is that he doesn't care what color shirt he wears to church, which is so
Yeah.
controversial for some reason, and he feels like he's like really
Hmm.
being
He's flying that
controversial.
flag. Yeah.
He's really challenging the norms there when it's just the color of a shirt. But I understand what he means.
I also noticed the
Yeah.
people like this because I've known people like this growing up. I think I was
Hmm.
one of these people in some way. I think you
Yeah.
probably were too, to an
For some
extent.
time.
You will go through that phase of differentiating between the culture of the church and the doctrine of the church, and you'll get comfortable criticizing the culture of the church because you're like, well, I can criticize that. That's not
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
church.
And the
That's just
policies. Yeah.
that's yeah, right.
Hmm.
And so if we can muddy the waters around policies, say, well, that's just a policy. I can disagree with that.
Hmm.
That's why people really don't like that Dan H. Oaks quote when he says, I don't know it's possible to differentiate between policy and doctrine in a church that believes that we have a living prophet. People don't like that because a lot of people's way of dealing with the cognitive dissonance is they take a lot of the things they don't like about the church and they blame that on the culture. Even if it is
Yes.
prescribed from Salt Lake City, they just blame it on the culture. And this culture, that thing can be got rid of. And so it seems like your dad's kind of in some of that
Yeah.
position where his
Yeah.
way of dealing with the things he doesn't like about the church is to be like, well, that's culture, so I can I can get I
Yeah.
can
And
get
so
feisty with that.
yeah, and he has kind of a reputation for being a little like different and
Hmm.
feisty, like you say. And so that's kind of a reason that he is also like ostracized to some extent, or at least he feels that
Right.
he is, because
Hmm.
he doesn't get any like many leadership positions or something
Right.
in the church.
Because he doesn't toe the
Yeah,
party
because
line,
yeah,
you know.
he was mostly for most of my youth he was my Sunday school teacher
Okay.
as well. Yeah.
I just have to say, right, I was a Sunday school teacher as well. All the best guys in the church are Sunday school teachers. I'm just getting that out there.
Yeah.
All the best guys. Your dad, I'm sure John's been a Sunday school teacher. I'm sure Bill Reel's been a Sunday school teacher. It seems to be where they put the vocal
Yeah.
ones who kind of want to have their say, stick them in
I
Sunday school.
suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I mean, while we're on the topic of your parents, let's ask the question, how has this been with you and your parents? How have you broached the topic of your faith crisis, or have you not?
Or like since like right now, like what it's like now, or
Or
like should I
just
talk through?
through it? So yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I think it was like it was a huge build up until I decided that I couldn't believe anymore.
Hmm.
But I think in March 2021 was when I was like, yeah, I'm done. I can't do this anymore.
Okay.
And I kept it a secret for about a month from everyone,
Hmm.
except for my best friend, like I said, and she was elated that I was finally uh, out.
Hmm.
And
Okay. So how did that
yeah,
conversation
so
go? How did that first conversation go?
uh, let's see. Well, I was very emotional, and I was heartbroken, honestly, because I tried so hard and I still failed. But at the same time, I felt like the church was all a lie, and I felt so hurt, and so it was just a lot of feelings going on. And she was trying to be empathetic, but at the same, she was just really really happy, and she was like, "Oh, now we can go out drinking together," and all.
Did you know she was out? So was that why she was a safe person to go to? Did you know she was out already, or
uh,
was it one of those
what do
"oh
you mean?
me
Oh, my
too"
best friend.
moments?
Oh,
Yeah.
my best friend wasn't in the church.
Oh,
That's what I
okay. She's
mean.
never been a member of
Yeah.
the church.
Never. No.
Ah, apologies.
Yeah.
I made an assumption there.
No,
So,
that's okay. Yeah. So yeah, we'd been best friends for like 6 years at that point,
right. Okay.
and um, we'd gotten along about everything. But then if something about religion came up in conversation, it would always get a little tense
Okay.
because I had these opinions that were not really opinions and beliefs that were not really grounded in anything. And when she would say something really rational, I would get offended.
I
Like
mean,
at first.
let's have your best
And,
friend's side of the story for a second, because she's just
yeah.
written in. She
Exactly.
says, "I had
Exactly.
been unsuccessfully trying to get you out of there in the beginning of your friendship, and then gave up."
Yeah,
So,
and she gave up around, I think around the time that I actually started getting into all of this.
okay.
But yeah, I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't think
Sorry.
she could
Carry
have.
on. Yeah.
I don't think she could have gotten me out because you can't really, you know, get out of that Mormon mindset unless you feel like you're able to.
Hmm.
You can't accept the truth about something unless you're ready to hear the truth.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So in the end, she was really happy for me that I'd finally figured it out.
Hmm.
And she was the only safe person that I could go to talk about this.
Yeah.
So it really strengthened our friendship, I feel like. Um, and yeah, I didn't tell my parents for a month.
Hmm.
So, but I still continued to, go to seminary and to church and to pretend to be someone that I wasn't. And that was really difficult for me. So um, after that month, I told my parents, first of all, that I wanted to um, quit my calling as Young Women's Class President, which I was at the time. I just said that I didn't want to be it anymore, and they started asking follow-up questions like, "Why?
Hmm.
What's going on?" And that's when it kind of slipped out that I don't feel like I can be responsible for these girls because I don't believe the church anymore.
And who did
Um,
you say that to? Sorry.
that was my mom,
Okay.
and my mom told my dad later.
Hmm.
But yeah, at first my parents were really in shock. They didn't know like how serious this was for me. They thought maybe it's just something that will go over or something.
Hmm.
So they did um, tell me to still go to church and still attend activities and all of that. And I did that for a while, and I didn't tell anyone at church for a while, even though they did know that I was having a difficult time.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. And so that really hurt to have my parents just completely ignore like this thing that I'd spend months and months researching and doubting, and it took me so long to learn to trust myself. But when I'd finally done it, my parents wouldn't accept it,
Mm-hmm.
and that was difficult. But then after I think a month or two of that, I stepped up for myself and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I was almost at the end of my last high school year,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt like I need to assert independence because I'm going to be an adult, and I'm my own person. I can make my own decisions. And it took them a while to accept that, and at first they didn't, but they felt like I should be able to make my own choice, even though they were really angry and disappointed with me. So I didn't stop going right away. I think before that I had an interview scheduled with my bishop. Not a temple interview, that I'd had that like a few months before. But he knew that I was having a difficult time. He didn't know that I was that far along yet. But so I went to talk to him. This was still online. And so he started asking me, so how are you feeling? And all of that. And there was this silence. And then I was like, well, I just feel like I have to tell you that, I don't believe in the church anymore. I don't want to go anymore. And it felt like a huge weight off my chest. And my bishop was also in shock at first, but he didn't really feel an entitlement to change me or anything. Right. He didn't want to convince me anymore, because he felt from the way that I was speaking that it was like a decision that I'd made definitively. Yeah. And so he was like, well, first I think he said, I'm sorry to hear that, because it's hard for him to lose a youth like that, because we're not very there's not a lot of us in the church, and I was really strong believer before that, and I was an example to everyone around me. It's like, I'm sorry to hear that, but I respect that you've made the decision, and I hope you have a good life after this thing. So it was mostly just a good conversation, and he was really respectful, which I didn't expect. But yeah, that was nice. That was nice.
And do you feel like that's a because we haven't gone on the nationalist train in about 20 minutes or so, do you feel like that is a specific thing to kind of Dutch people, to members in Holland? Obviously we can't generalize massively, but do you feel like it is I guess what I'm saying is a lot of the expectation we get, and the reason these podcasts I think are so important, is you hear about the crazy militant Utah bishop who screamed at someone in their office, how dare you try and leave this church? And, like, we hear these stories. But then also there's these stories coming out of places like Netherlands, like my bishop at the moment, of people being very understanding. Do you feel like a lot of bishops in Netherlands would have been like that? Or is your bishop special within the church in Netherlands?
No, well, I've had several bishops across the wards that I've been to, and most of them were nice people and good guys. I've had mostly good experiences with them. I did feel like they were very, strict in the faith. Like the one that I had like a few years ago was so strict that he didn't allow his kids to watch a Disney movie before he'd watched the first half hour himself, to check that it was appropriate for them.
Cool.
Which I thought was extreme, but it's like that's the kind of, that's the kind of person that he was. But other than that, they're very respectful, and they're kind and understanding for the most part. So I feel like I got lucky to some extent. Yeah, because it could have gone a lot worse, of course, because there are no regulations in place and no training or anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad that I got the ones that I had.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So there is still that bishop roulette going on in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Which of course there always is going to be, because people are individuals. I get that.
Yeah.
I was just wondering whether some of that laid back Dutchness had made its way into church leadership positions, but of course they still have a rule book to follow, right? They have the church handbook to follow still. So you know. Okay, so you told your bishop, and after that point, you said you feel like this weight came off your chest. So is that
Yeah.
when you then started to kind of become more public about it, or do you still
Yeah,
keep it to
well,
yourself?
I didn't know how to tell the other people at church because
Hmm.
I didn't, it was all still online, and I didn't feel like I wanted to send a message in a group chat like, "Hey
Hmm.
guys,"
See
and
ya.
that didn't feel appropriate. So I felt
Yeah.
like I kind of wouldn't talk about it, and they would just assume, what had
Hmm.
happened. I told a few of my church friends, and they all did know, and some of them, one girl actually understood me in a lot of ways. And I talked to her about a lot of church history as well. When
Hmm.
I was still like in the early stages of the faith
Hmm.
transition.
And were there any
So she
specific
understood.
issues you spoke to her about?
Well, it was mostly about polygamy and how we both felt it was messed up. But I got to a point that I was like, well, I can't believe in this anymore, and
Hmm.
she still chose to. So we just kind of separated
Right.
in that sense. But she
Hmm.
did understand where I was coming from, so I did
Yeah.
feel kind of empathy from her. But everyone else, I didn't really talk to. My leader started asking me where I was, and I did ended up having to send them a message.
Hmm.
And I was still kind of angry about the whole finding out the church isn't true thing.
Hmm.
So some of the messages that I sent her might have come off a little bit, aggressive. And even though I didn't mean it to, that's just the way
Hmm.
that was feeling at the time. And I was trying my best not to be hostile, but you're just so hurt at the time that that's the only thing that you can really do for a little
Yeah.
while. And I hope that they understand that now. I haven't spoken to them since.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
I get that. I remember the
Mm,
day after I kind of my shelf snapped, I was talking to my best friend and
hmm.
just word vomit. It was
Yeah.
just right. It just kind of comes out and I couldn't really control it. And we talk a lot on this podcast about how that's not the right thing to do. So
No,
learn
of
from my
course not.
mistakes. Don't do that.
Well, it's
Uh,
yeah.
but it's a really,
Mm,
even when you are trying to talk to someone quite a measured way, really thinking about what you say, it's very hard not to let that hurt come through.
mm, mm-hmm.
Because going
Feels
back
so
to what your mum
personal.
said, exactly,
Yeah.
you're told, well, make sure you're feeding your emotional side as well. There's a lot of emotional attachment. This isn't just a thought
Mm-hmm.
thing. This is how I feel. This is
Yeah.
my
My
feelings,
my entire worldview up to this point. Yeah, it's insane.
which I was heavily invested in by, well,
Yeah.
I felt good about it,
Yes.
therefore I still remained, right? Because that's
Mm-hmm.
how we're told the truth of things. So I just want to ask before we kind of move on, I know you talked about Jim Bennett and how the weight of kind of everything is what kind of snapped your shelf. But are
Mm.
there any particular issues, like the polygamy, for example, or anything like that, that really stood out to you that you thought were particularly impactful on you?
Oh, well, just everything about polygamy, just I thought that was so messed up. Like even like very early on when I was like 11, when I learned about polygamy in the temple, I yeah, I learned from my dad that, when you're a man and your wife dies, you're able to remarry eternally in the temple. So in the afterlife, you'll be able to have several wives. And when I was 11, I was already like, that seems really unfair and messed up. But I didn't realize that it like kind of stemmed from the past and the history of the church. And when I found out about the specifics of that, and it just really blew my mind how these
Mm.
men that I idolized my whole life were actually just really awful people, and that there's no way that God could have chosen them if He exists. Yeah, it's just, and other than that, also the history of racism in the church,
Mm.
which, yeah, because I found out, I didn't know before going into my faith crisis about the race ban, and about,
Hmm.
that it was lifted in 1978, which I thought was incredibly recent. And I
Hmm.
didn't know anything about it, and my dad hadn't told me about it. And even though Brigham Young was his favorite president of the church, that he had spoken about a few times, but I've talked to him about things that Brigham Young has like spoken about and claimed as doctrine, like the racial teachings and blood atonement, for example. I tried to talk to him about when I was in my faith crisis, and he was like, "Well, that's not true." So he didn't know anything about Brigham Young, really.
Right.
So it was just really upsetting to learn all of that, and how you know how I don't know how bigoted the church really is, and how they don't really care about anything but themselves as an institution. Like also with the $100 billion fund and all of that I think I find out about through your videos, which also really struck a chord with me because with all that money you should be helping people, like and I felt such a drive in me to to make the world a better place. And I felt like the church wasn't doing that at all, and they weren't as like compassionate to others or altruistic as I thought that they were. And that also just everything that I thought about the church was wrong. Just,
Now, if I throw
yeah.
my apologist hat on
Yeah,
for a
oh
moment,
God.
and or just my person in the comments yelling at Christina and being like, "Well, I knew about the race ban. I knew that this had happened in 1978. So why didn't you? That's your fault for not knowing." Now, I'm aware that it does come up. It's an official declaration,
Yeah.
but just because it's there, I want to ask you about your personal experience, which is all you can really speak to. Do you feel like it was kept from you? Do you feel like it's something you were kept away from, or you just didn't know?
By the people like directly in my environment, I don't know if they specifically try to keep it from me. I just think that it's something that's not talked about a lot because it's a difficult and controversial topic. I know that when I told my dad about it, he did know that it was a thing, and he was the first one that tried to rationalize it. Because
And how did he try to rationalize it?
he used the times were different argument.
Yeah.
And which worked for me for a while, but after that I was like, well, God is eternal, he should know that it's wrong. This is pretty basic stuff. But what was I saying? What was your question after?
So I was just asking, do you feel like it was kept from you?
It was
Do you feel like anything was hidden from you beyond the priesthood ban as well? You can come to that too.
Well, I don't know. Like, I don't think any of the people directly in my life were actually trying to keep it from me. I think a lot of them actually didn't know about a lot of the stuff like I did. But I do feel like the church as an institution tried to keep it from all of us. So that did feel like a lot like betrayal. Yeah.
Okay. So you feel like this stuff had been hidden or certainly not advertised to you?
Because it's not in the manuals, and the manuals are things that people, like everyone, teaches from. If it's not in there, then it's not really going to come up, right? So for example, section 132 of Doctrine and Covenants, we kind of like brushed over that in seminary. We didn't really talk about it. It was so long, I don't think I bothered to read it the year that we had to. And so we just didn't realize about any of the polygamy stuff. And if we did talk about it, we kind of put it in the sense that about eternal marriage, and that it's not about polygamy because the new covenant means eternal marriage. They were just kind of trying to change what it meant. Other than that, I don't think we really talked much about the official declaration, the second one, either in seminary. Although it might just be that I don't remember. But one thing that we did talk about, that was one of my first years, about the Mountain Meadows Massacre. I only realized afterwards when I started researching during my faith crisis, like, oh, right, we talked about this before, but we didn't really make a big deal out of it, and we didn't really realize how like wrong it was and what really had happened, how the Mormons were at fault. And yeah, just I don't know. I don't think anything. Oh, right. The craziest thing I remember was a woman in young women's class talking about paying her 10% or feeding her baby, and she chose tithing. Her baby didn't starve in the end, but damn.
That
Yeah, no,
is.
I took her to church a few times, and she was always like creeped out by it, but she
Mm.
thought it was fascinating in like a weird way.
Sorry, that was
But she,
Christina's best friend.
my best
Put a
friend,
comment up on screen
um,
for those that are listening to the
yeah,
audio. Yeah.
and uh,
Just showing an
yeah,
example of
and it
what
was
seems normal to us as members of the church, but to an
yeah.
outsider seems mental.
Now she really put it into perspective. Every time she was at church with me, and I never really wanted to take her, but when she was sleeping over on Saturday, we'd have to, go to church on
Mm-hmm.
Sunday. It's the logical thing to do. But I always started realizing how this sounded to her, like in her mind, and I was just weirded out by everything that the leader
Mm-hmm.
said suddenly, like
Yeah.
stuff like that. For example, yeah, we also had a chastity lesson, like an object lesson in young women's once about that a young woman is like a dollar bill, and
Mm-hmm.
if she is sexually intimate with someone like outside of marriage, she gets like crumpled or like torn apart, and she loses her value. Like that was kind
Mm-hmm.
of the lesson. And I think I was 16 or something, and I heard that, and I was like, yeah, that doesn't sound right. Um, yeah, it's just such a stuff like that you then forget about after, but it then like years later it comes
Comes back.
back. Yeah.
Mm. And then I suppose in
Huh.
your head you've got that frame of reference now to come
Hmm.
from your best friend who's pointed this
Yeah.
stuff out, and you come back and you think, oh no, she had a point.
Yeah, she had a
Actually,
point. Yeah,
yeah.
I think one time when I told her, I took her to a stake dance once, and a stake dance is not just a dance. We have like activities beforehand.
Okay.
I think we had like a Book of Mormon quiz or something,
Oh,
and she was
scripture
there,
chase. Yeah.
and she was texting someone on her phone. She wasn't really interested, but I saw like she texted something like, "Yeah, I'm attending an activity of a cult or something." That's what she said, and afterwards, I was just really really mad at her for saying that
Uh-huh.
to her friend. But in retrospect, I can understand why she would say that.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
I'm
for sure.
sorry.
No worries. So make sure
Yeah.
we're back in the timeline, otherwise John will tell me off.
Mm-hmm. Gosh.
No, no, he won't. He won't. He's lovely.
Okay.
So we're getting back to the timeline where you've kind of told your parents a bit, and your dad's trying to justify some of these issues. Is that where we were? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Because you've told
right.
your best friend, and now you're trying to open up to your parents a bit. And
Mm-hmm.
how's that going?
Well, first there were a lot of arguments, especially at the dinner table, because after dinner we would have scripture study. And I would bring up some things that I learned about church history. And my dad would always say, oh, you don't have a source for that. It's because I never came prepared with a website or a document on my
Right.
phone because. But after a while, I found this thing on the church website about the Partridge sisters,
Uh-huh.
which were sisters that Joseph Smith both married behind Emma's back, and it was all like written down. Like there was a part of Emma about one of the Partridge sisters' diary on the church website,
Mm.
and it was all laid out so clearly. And I was like, I have to show them this because this is like definitive proof that Joseph Smith was a sleazeball, the bad person. And so I went to them with this, and I told them the story, and I showed them the diary entry of I think it was Eliza. I don't know. I can't remember. Um, oh, cool. And so I showed my parents that, and they were immediately like, "No, that's not true. That can't be true." And I was like, "But this is literally a diary entry from one of the people, like a firsthand source of a woman that was in this relationship with Joseph Smith." And my dad was like, "Well, she's too close to the situation. She's biased. She must have something against him. She must be proving like trying to paint him in a bad light or something."
Right.
And he was completely just. I thought it was very irrational of him to react like that to a very reliable, like this is a real source of something that really
Mm-hmm.
happened with a real victim involved,
Mm-hmm.
like victims actually. yeah, it was really messed up for me to hear him say that, because he just didn't believe anything that I was saying. And I realized that there's nothing that I could do to change that. There's no source that I could show him, because he doesn't want to change his mind, and that's what it comes down to. So there's no real reason to try anymore. And so after that was the last thing that I ever told them about church history, because after that I was like, it's a lost cause. There's no point in telling them anything anymore. And yeah, I think that was before I definitively left, but it was yeah, it was really difficult. Yeah.
Okay, so you're in a situation now where you've told your best friends, you've got someone to talk to, but I'm right in saying so far no institute didn't help, parents haven't provided useful answers, friends at church, you haven't done a whole bye Felicia in a thing, you haven't really told them about it, so there's been no kind of grand exit. So who did you reach out to that would understand? Because your best friend obviously isn't Mormon, so
Right.
and as supportive and as great as she is, and she's here now watching this, so she's being really good to you.
Yeah, I love her. Yeah.
There's this feeling sometimes where you're like, but I need to talk to someone who gets it, someone who went through it, or someone that gets all this mental lingo, all this wacky stuff.
Yeah.
Who were those people for you?
Well, first of all, I kept being on Reddit, but now I went more to the r/ex-Mormon side. I actually didn't have the courage to go on r/ex-Mormon before I definitively said, like, I don't believe in this anymore. Okay. Right? Because I don't know, it's from the outside, it's really intimidating subreddit, because, from the believing subreddits, you get the idea that they're very anti and just not rational and just mean and angry all the time. But in reality, they're just, they're people just like me who figured this stuff out. And, they have some right to be angry. But mostly they're just being rational people, right? Yeah. So I went on there and I found people to talk to, and I posted about some things that had bothered me about my my transition, about my story, stuff like that. Other than that, other than being on forums, I decided to start a podcast.
Nice.
Yeah, that was actually that was a month before I definitively decided to leave. Okay. So the first few episodes were still me being in a really difficult position, but trying to believe. And once I made like an episode about Joseph Smith's polygamy, that is when I was like, yeah, I'm done. Right. So it's just, you can see kind of my faith transition throughout that podcast, which makes it kind of interesting to listen to from an outside perspective. I feel
we'll
like
stick it in the show notes.
Yeah, I guess
people should go have a listen to that.
Yeah, but so I created that podcast. It's called Latter-day Ramblings. It's the first name that I could come up with,
it's
and
a cool
sounds
name.
kind of it sounds like a Mormon name, I feel like, because
it's just entrapment. Just get them where they don't think that it's, what I mean?
Yeah,
definitely.
So I created that as like I needed someone to talk to, and I needed to express my feelings in some way. And since I'd been listening to so many ex-Mormon podcasts, I was like, well, I can do something similar, but from my perspective. And I feel like in the ex-Mormon sphere, like blogosphere, I feel like I provide a unique perspective as a young woman in Europe. I feel like, I don't know. But so I started that, and I kind of started talking about several things that bothered me, just to get them off my chest. And I didn't really expect anyone to listen to them, and not many people did, to be honest. My audience is still very small, but that's not the reason that I do it, because it's just, it really helps me to process my feelings. And yeah, it's really helped me mentally to figure out who I am, and like after all of this. Yeah.
I mean, you have one fan, because I found the podcast. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
I'm a fan of your podcast. I thought it was great. And so it's one of the ways in which I kind of came across you through Reddit, and I think you responded to something, or I was like, who's this? Decided having a look. you're right. It's a very candid look into the beginnings of a faith crisis, and like you said, it is those ramblings that a lot of people do need to just get out and and we do have that need to vent and to process and to speak it out loud. And the fact that you're willing to do that publicly for the benefit of potential others that came across it, I think is really commendable.
Yeah, that's another reason that I did it, because I knew there must be other youths that are struggling with this, and I want to find a way to help them, because it's really difficult to go through what I did, because I know after that I joined this Discord server of ex-Mormon teenagers, and their situations are all just they're all so painful to hear about, because some people have been out since they were a lot younger than I am. And they're still, in the closet, so to speak, and they've been lying about who they are for years. And it's just so painful. And some others that I know have been actually kicked out of their house. And it's just all these stories. And I just wanted to do whatever I could to maybe make it a little better, even though there's not a lot that I can do, really. It's awful.
But you can help form that community for people. I mean, all the cool kids are on Discord. That's what I hear.
Oh, gosh.
I'm not one of those cool kids. I'm not on Discord. But I'm aware of what it is, and it's another great platform where kind of people can get together and have that. I just made myself sound really old, didn't I? A little bit.
No, it's okay. Social media goes really fast.
It does. I've only just got on TikTok.
I haven't got on TikTok.
Years after it was a cool thing. So it's really good, though, that you have these communities, and there are these communities out there. And, your maturity shines through, and I forget that you are still part of that teenage demographic. And
technically, yes. Yeah.
You are technically part of that group. So the fact that they have someone both speaking out and they have that community, I'd want that community to thrive and do well, and I think it should. And I'm glad that I'm glad that LDS teenagers have got their own subreddit. I think it's going to be a group that grows, particularly in the coming years. I think it's a group that has their own sort of individual needs for support, and I'm really glad that you're part of that group and able to help those people. I think that's really good.
Yeah, I hope I can do more in the future. Yeah.
So what else would you say about that group, about those experiences of people in your sort of age group going through this faith crisis? What do you think they need particularly?
What do I think they need? Well, I know from all of them that just the community of like-minded people and people who've been through the same thing just really helps you to get through that situation. Because they make you feel like you're not crazy. And that's like one of the main things that is impacting your mental health, because everyone around you believes in this and you're the only one who just is not able to. And, it just helps relieve the pain of the experience. Other than that, since teenagers are minors, there's not much that you can do, because their parents are still in control of their lives and they're still the authority figures in their lives. And as the commenter says, we need chill parents.
Yeah, Harrison Lawson says, we need chill parents. I feel like each of those full stops is like a hand clap.
100%. We need parents who actually respect their children in the identity that they choose for themselves.
Yeah.
But, in Mormonism, it's not as prevalent. There's still a lot of, hierarchy, of course, maybe because of the priesthood dynamic. But yeah, it's just really difficult, and I wish I could do more for them. Yeah.
Well, we'll keep, as a group. I don't like speaking for the ex-Mormon community, because I feel
I suppose
it's such a diverse group. But to those that can hear this and are listening to this, support ex-Mormon teenagers, in whatever way you can, and support each other generally. But there's a vulnerable group of minors essentially who are coming out of a high demand religion, and they're in need of something. So if we can help them, particularly as kind of a particularly vulnerable group, we could say that, I think that would be really good.
Yes, definitely.
Right. I think the final part of all this now, because we've gone through 18 years of your life, we've arrived at today.
Yeah. Oh
How
God.
are things for you? How are things for you now? What is
Oh.
what is your experience now? Your relationships now, etc.
Well, so I'm in my first year of university now. I
Hmm.
am, for the most part, independent. I don't live with my parents anymore. I live with my grandma,
Hmm.
like kind of in the top floor of her house. So it's kind of my own little apartment,
Awesome.
which is nice, with my cousin as well.
Hmm.
And so I feel like I have more control over my own life and my own decisions, which is great. And I feel
Hmm.
a lot happier now that I just can choose who I am and what I want to do and be. Yeah.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And so your relationship with your parents now that
Oh
you're
well,
out of the home.
I try to go home at like every 2 weeks. I
Hmm.
still love being with my siblings. I love them a lot. Um, and in the beginning, after I left and started living here and going back on the weekends, it was really difficult. There was still a lot of tension,
Hmm.
but that started kind of dissipating after a while. And we both kind of stopped arguing and accepted that the situation is the way it is and we can't
Hmm.
change each other. Not that I personally didn't want to change my parents necessarily. I just wanted them to understand me and like
Hmm.
why I made the decision that I did. And I feel like they understand me better now. So I've gotten somewhere.
Hmm.
And they kind of have stopped trying to convert me back, which they really wanted to do in the beginning. Um, and at the beginning they were also very, very sad and going through the stages of grief because of course as a Mormon parent you feel like you lost a child
Hmm.
and your eternal family won't be complete, and that of course that hurts in your
Hmm.
worldview. And I do understand that, and I didn't know how to navigate that necessarily because
Hmm.
it's such a big thing, and I don't know how they think about that now.
Hmm.
But we've gotten a lot more respectful around each other,
That's good.
and there's not many fights anymore. And we just try to keep it chill,
Hmm.
like he said. So
And so,
it's better, yeah.
do
And
you
the
have
distance also
any?
helps.
I
Yeah,
can imagine. I can imagine
yeah,
the
yeah.
distance, being on top of someone like, especially during COVID, going through a faith crisis. My
Hmm.
poor mother, my wife and I were living with my mother at the time. She could
Oh,
not escape uh, it, right?
yeah, yeah.
So that space and distance really helps. I'm wondering if you have any advice for talking about how we can help ex-mo teenagers. Do you have any advice for ex-mo teenagers about how to have these conversations with their parents? Anything you maybe
Okay.
wish you'd done differently that you feel like you could pass on as some advice?
Well, my first instinct was to argue with them.
Hmm.
Don't do that, even though you think you're right. There's no way to convince someone who doesn't want to change their mind, and so I think it's better to speak with them about your personal experience because there's not really any way that they can argue with that because that's
Hmm.
just how you experience things unless they start gaslighting you with it, which is also a possibility, and it's a whole different thing that
Hmm.
to navigate that also sucks. But mostly try to speak from your heart and from your feelings and your identity, and
Hmm.
try to appeal to them emotionally and get them to understand you on an emotional level. I
Hmm.
think that's the best that you can do. I don't really know anything else that you could do, unless you have an idea.
No,
No.
because I went
Yeah.
about it all the wrong way.
Yeah. No.
So
It's
and
yeah.
I'm not self-reflective enough to have worked out just how I got it wrong, so I can share
Hmm.
what not to do. All I can really
Yeah.
say is don't be like me.
Don't be like me.
Don't be like me. That's my
Yeah.
takeaway from all this.
Yeah.
But
Because
I
I
think
mean,
that's solid advice. Carry on.
most
Sorry.
of people's parents, love them a lot.
Mm.
So, you're still try to be a family as far as that is possible. Of
Hmm.
course, there's some things that parents do, abusive behavior that you don't have to tolerate,
Hmm.
of course. And there's a line to be drawn, that you can decide for yourself whether it's healthy to still have a relationship with your parents or not, or what kind of relationship that you want to have once you become independent. It's a difficult issue. But I think as long as you both still love each other, you can find a way to somehow make it work if you both try to understand where you're coming from. But it's just, I don't know, it doesn't work in every case, obviously.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's fair. And we can't really provide advice that will work in every case, but yeah, I think it's good that you can share that experience with people. So thank you for that. So other relationships, other things like, for example, old church friends and things like that.
By the way, one thing, so I haven't shared about my relationship with my parents. They don't know that I'm doing this. They don't know anything about this, and they don't know about my podcast.
Okay.
They don't know about this interview. I haven't told them
All right.
about any of it. And I hope that if they ever find this, that this comes across as, compassionate and respectful, because that's what I'm trying to be. And I guess a preemptive I'm sorry. But this is it. This is what I'm doing. This is who I am. That is it. Yeah.
Well, there you go. And Christina's parents, you should be very proud of her. She's done an amazing job telling us all about her experience.
I've tried. Yeah.
You've done a great job. And I'm really grateful that you've come on here despite the fact that, your parents don't know about this, and you've just gone for it and you've been brave. That's amazing.
No, I was really scared beforehand.
But you've done brilliantly.
This is good, yeah.
Brilliantly. So tell me a little bit about any sort of old church relationships, anything now that people that you've managed to keep a hold of, or is it all just kind of you've moved into a new group?
It's all kind of gone. I don't really talk to anyone from church anymore. I mean, there might be like the odd group chat that I'm still in, and people might send a few things in there, but it's not really, a friendship or something that is going on. Yeah.
Okay.
So no.
So your people are now in the online forums and and your best friend
and
stuck
new
by
friends
you through all this.
Yeah, new friends that I've made in real life at my university and all of that. Yeah.
So you're feeling like you can move forward, which is excellent.
Yes. But the weird thing is, it's still kind of difficult once people start asking about your background. I have to go into this whole spiel about Mormonism. And it's just, it's also, it's always kind of difficult to, I don't know how to bring it to people. I don't know how to tell people about it necessarily, because it's something that's kind of behind me, but it still has a lot of influence on the person that I've become.
Well, that's something we should talk about. Like how you've just you put this on yourself. So how do you? What have you said to people in terms of how you've explained?
Well, sometimes like if I have the time, and most people once they hear like, oh well, I was raised Mormon, and once I tell them what Mormonism really is, they start becoming like, fascinated by it, and they give me all the time to like explain it. So over time and over like several conversations, I've kind of gotten the hang of how to tell people about it. It's just something that people find really interesting, fascinating to hear about. It's not something that's common in the Netherlands, obviously, because the church is so small here that it's so statistically unlikely that I'd be raised in it. And then when I tell my story about it, they just think that, you've been really brave, and, they really admire me for the journey that I've been on. And it gives me a lot of validation, actually, to talk about it now, especially also this interview, actually. It's really nice to be here. Thank you.
No worries. And when people ask now, you can just send them a URL and be like, you want to know? Here you go. Here's my interview.
Oh, God.
Just send them this way.
Yeah. No, well, because usually I have to tell them more specifics about, what the church is like. But yeah, this interview is a good reference point, I feel like.
Yeah. You're just like, you want to know my Mormon story? Here you go. All right. Well, thank you very much, Christina. Unless there's anything burning that you think I've missed, that I've glossed over,
Uh, no, I think
Because
that's pretty
please
much.
do.
I think that's pretty much it. I can't really think of anything else. Yeah, this has been amazing. Honestly, thank you so much. Yeah.
No, it's been my pleasure. I'm really grateful that you've joined us. I'll say a huge dankjewel
Dankjewel.
to Christina
Yeah.
for her time here.
Yes.
And a thank you to all of you who have been watching. Shameless plugging time. Mormon Stories does take donations. We are donor funded. It allows brilliant conversations like this to happen. So if you can consider being a monthly donor, please do. If you want to find out what Christina's up to, go check out. It'll be in the show notes. Her podcast. Go listen to her Faith Crisis happen live,
Well,
as it were.
Yeah, I don't upload episodes as often anymore. Maybe once a month.
Cool.
But there's a lot of content that you can go through for sure.
Yeah. If you want like the behind the scenes of what you're watching now, that's Christina's podcast, right? So go check that out. The making of will be there. Go check that out. I'm allowed to shamelessly self-plug my own channel, Nemo the Mormon. If you want to go see what Christina found when she came across my channel during her faith crisis, go check that out.
Yeah, definitely.
All you European Exmos out there, if you have a story to tell, please come and tell it. If you want to bring someone with you to translate into English so we can have a conversation, please do. I'm happy to work through a translator. That would be brilliant. And I don't know what else to say, but thank you very much, Christina, for being here. Oh, hang on. I do have something to mention.
Oh, okay.
Thrive. There is a Thrive going on in the UK next week, I believe it is. So Thrive is our events for people who have left Mormonism, who want to find community, who want to find the sort of community that Christina's been looking for and that she has found online. If you want to try and find it in person as well, Thrive is a great place to do that. Because I love Europe so much, I'm also putting on thrive.de, the German Thrive. So I'm putting on a Thrive for German Exmos. That's going to be in June. More details for that will follow. I am going to also, I'm sure at some point, come out to the Netherlands and try and do thrive.nl, try and do something.
Well, let's see how many people show up.
I'll do it for 2 of you, right? Because it doesn't matter to me how many people turn up. It would be awesome. So all your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much, Christina, for coming on. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, like this video, tell your friends, and we'll see you next time. Have a great one. Bye.
Bye.